Oh, geez, it's all my government.
Yeah, that's a good one.
5 hour part?
Well, the last
Yeah,
evaluation.
I have an hour and a half.
Legal for Saturdays. Yeah, 1:30 to 2:30. I think it's probably just gonna be us mostly.
No, this isn't, no.
This is with the lawyer.
Yeah.
20th. Next coming tonight?
Anderson's not involved in that.
It's just
Where's he
one
gonna
person.
sit?
And Jasper and Richard and Marvin,
People
our
that,
technical expert that we have.
the people that have been going to the mediations. So Henderson is not. Why would
How would they show up for that?
Why would they show up for that?
We're gonna go ahead and call this meeting, regular meeting of December 10th, 2018 to order.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome, everybody, and thank you for being here tonight. First thing we have on the agenda is our approval of the agenda. Can I get a motion, please?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion is carried. Before we go on into our consent agenda, just wanted to go ahead and give everybody a little bit of an update. Thank you for everybody that participated with the Christmas pageantry that we had last Friday. I think that it went extremely well. Really good turnout, a lot of participation from lots of the different businesses within town. And that said, I hope that even next year it's going to be better. Every year it seems to be getting better, and I think everybody within the city really enjoys seeing the tree all lit up. So thank you especially to our Chamber of Commerce and to the people that organized everything, and thank you to our city staff for doing everything that they had to do to get everything prepared. And with that said, we also want to make sure that we thank the Rotary, we want to thank the Lions, everybody that had anything to do with the parade. And now if we can go ahead and take a moment to give some appreciation to one of our own here. Mr. Dave Johnson, please. Would you please stand? Be recognized. Certificate of Appreciation Award to Dave Johnson, thanking you for your 4 years of service and dedication to the Sueur City Council from 2015 to 2018. And it's signed by everybody, with the exception of one, but we'll get that taken care of. Thank you very much for everything you've done, especially everything you did regarding the CPAT, the Comprehensive Plan Action Team, the Downtown Master Plan, the housing study, so many things that you did. It'd take me an hour to go on and talk about everything, but you're going to be very, very missed. and we all want to thank you for everything you've done for the city of Sueur.
Okay, thank you.
And then we'll just get it on over to Dave. If I have a little bit of a lisp tonight, it's because I broke off a tooth, so I do apologize for that. Took a fall, broke my glasses, and broke a tooth. Okay, so, consent agenda. All items on the consent agenda are considered routine and have been made available to the city council at least 2 days in advance of the meeting. The items will be enacted in one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a council member or citizen so requests, in which event the item will be removed from the agenda and considered the normal sequence. Tonight on our consent agenda, we have our city council minutes for November 26, 2018, the approval of disbursements through November 26, 2018, the 2019 polling place designation, personnel actions, ordinance number 558, which is the rental regulations summary publication, and the Minnesota River Valley Transit Financial Services consent. Can I go ahead and get a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second?
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion is carried. We now move on to the public comment portion. Is there anybody from the public that would like to address city council? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to go ahead and close the public comment portion.
So moved.
We have a second, okay, any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No. We now move on to our regular agenda, item 6 alpha, which is the recreation program discussion.
Mayor Hay, members of City Council. We had a discussion with Marlene Johnson from the Sueur Henderson School District. She is the superintendent. People in attendance at that meeting on November 20th were Newell Krogman, myself, and Mayor Hay. From that conversation, it was a very good conversation that we had. Essentially, the school district, or Marlene, gave direction to the city to try to figure out what we wanted to do with our rec program and then let them know and they would adapt. So what we ended up doing is we brought this to the Personnel and Budget Committee on November 28th. We had been extensive discussion about this, talking about if we wanted to have a part-time position, a director level position, split with the school district like what we had before, or if it was time to go forward with the model that we had before with a full-time position in that role as the community center manager and recreation manager. What we've done with the 2019 budget, which will be evaluated here later tonight, is we've included a position in there for a full-time recreation manager position. Now, we don't have to take action tonight about this. We just want to have a conversation with City Council as far as direction we possibly want to go forward with. At the Personnel and Budget, we looked at the position. We looked at it originally. What I had called it was the community center manager. Through that discussion, it morphed into a recreation manager. And in the job description, there'll be a focus on the facility management aspect of it, because that's an important component of what we want them to do for the city of Sueur, looking at the facility, making sure the facility is in the best shape it can be, and that we're planning properly for the future, for the citizens, making sure that it's a safe facility for people to visit. So what we've done is we've looked at that. We have a job description. We would recommend bringing that forward to a future Personnel and Budget Committee meeting to look at, similar to what we've done to some other positions for the city that are changing or that have changed, and look at that and see if that's the direction we want to go. Once Personnel and Budget would make that recommendation to either have them full-time or part-time or what they would want to do to City Council, we would need to take action at that level. What that would entail is amending the organizational structure that we have. What we'd be proposing, or what I'd be proposing at that time, is to move basically the rec and community ed director position to a manager position under the public services director. And then recently we hired the rec coordinator, and we have a recreation administrative assistant as well in that group. So we would look at amending the organizational structure at the city council level, but I'd just like to have a discussion about this position. If we wanna, look at it closer, at the personnel and budget, I can take that direction and we can move that forward. Eventually, you guys will be looking at the budget tonight and you'll have that in there, and if it's something that you don't wanna have in there, you know, that's something that we can take out. The recommendation would be just to keep it in there, and if we change our mind as far as a full-time position, we can do that at a later date, just for the sake of getting the budget passed, since it is budgeted and we have allocations for it. Now, one question that came up at both the school board meeting and the personnel and budget is the school district partnership. How can we continue to partner with the school district? It's identified in the comprehensive plan, you know, partner with or find public partnerships, and one of those is with the school district. So what we've looked at is maintaining that one-stop shop where a citizen of Sueur can come to the community center and register for both a recreation program and a community education program. I have a meeting set up with Ms. Johnson this week to talk about how we make that work with the existing staff that we have, and I think we have a good plan, and I've talked to her about preliminary things with that, utilizing our existing staff and the school district's existing staff. There will be an aspect of cross-training for that, making sure that both staff, admin components, understand the various programming for both community ed and rec. We've looked at the budget, so if you remember, our recreation and community education director was essentially a half-time position here at the city. It was a full-time position overall, but it was split between the school district and the city. So we'd be transitioning, if we would go with the budget in the model that I proposed, from a half-time director position to a full-time manager position. The budget impact of this is around approximately $32,000. I'd say approximate because it's assuming a couple things. One is that the position would be hired at the middle of the pay scale at that grade 14. And if that would be the case, it would be around a $32,000 increase. And that has been included in the budget. And that can change if somebody has less experience, more experience. That would be a recommendation that would come from me. There have been discussions about leadership and strategic planning and those things. To me, the basic org structure that we have here at the city is a director, a manager, a supervisor, and a coordinator. Those types of positions. So if a director level position is desired by city council, we should have that discussion tonight. If that's the case, that would be, we'd have to amend the budget to include another around $20,000 for that to turn into a director level position. Now, I feel confident that the public services director, along with myself, administration, we can effectively strategically plan the community center with input from the rec manager, the rec coordinator, the rec admin assistant. So those formal planning documents, which council is very heavily involved in, would be facilitated by the public services director and the city administrator. If that model is something that you want to talk about and we want to have a director level position, we can definitely do that. The recommendation from myself is to hire a manager. If that position grows into what I would consider a director, that'd be a good professional path to occur over the next 5 years or something like that. So it leaves some room for growth. And I think that it meets all the needs of the city that we've identified. There's a community center analysis report that was done, and it has an emphasis on strategic planning. And I think that just having the hours that were allocated, basically we're going from 60 hours a week. This is prior to the rec coordinator position, to 120 hours a week if this is approved. So there'll be a significant amount of time allocation increase for this, and that'll help with the facility and planning and programming, I believe. So what we're looking at, you'll see on the screen, the public services director will oversee the rec manager, and the rec manager will have the rec coordinator and the administrative assistant report to them. Now, there is a component in there that I did not include, and that's the custodian part. What I would like to look at is making sure that it makes sense for us to hire a part-time or full-time custodian. So this year, what we're gonna do, at least for the beginning of the year, is we're gonna have some, contracted custodian services out there. We have that planned and budgeted in our budget. Now we'll look at possibly, combining the library and the wastewater and city hall into a position, or two, maybe possibly two part-time positions for custodian services. Some of the biggest challenges with that is finding personnel to do that. It's difficult. We're in a tough hiring environment. So looking for somebody to do that type of work might be challenging. So I think having a contracted entity do it in the beginning of the year, and then we can look at an evaluation around mid-year. And if it makes sense, cash flow wise, to hire somebody, either part-time or full-time, we would make that recommendation to city council. So that's been omitted from this at the time. I don't think it warrants us jumping into that at this time. I think we have to do a little bit more analysis. Looking at moving forward, so if the budget's approved tonight, the position could be filled by as early as February 1st. The job description is something that's in limbo. That basically what we would do is we'd look at what our existing job description is, remove components of the community education, and then bring that to the personnel budget for approval, and then we would post. And then, staff is recommending that we go the route of the recreation manager. We could look at a recreation director at that level, but at the time I believe that the rec manager would be the best fit for what we have in place right now. So we would really be focusing on recreation in our community center and getting our community center and rec programs really thoughtfully planned out as far as our programs, if they're making money, if they're not, things that we can do to enhance it. We'll get some real good people with experience in here to help guide us. So with that, I'll entertain any questions. We're not looking for any action tonight on this. This is just an open discussion. Like I said, we'll be evaluating the budget tonight, and in the budget we have it planned for a full-time rec manager position at a grade 14.
Councilmember Families.
As for what, as an asset to the community, what is the dollar amount, the value of the community center,
I don't know off the top of my head. I can't remember. I think it's fully depreciated. If I were to estimate, I'd say between $5 and $10 million.
Okay.
In that range.
It's a wide range, but
it is.
Let's just call it 7. All right. At approximately $7 million plus $1.5 million a year that it takes to be able to run this. You're talking about a recreation manager, all right? You're equal to about the same size as what a YMCA would be or a JCC would be, with almost the same amenities. Some things we have more of, some things they have more, or vice versa. My understanding for a recreation manager would be that this is the person that is running the business of the facility itself. Understanding, talking with the recreation coordinator with what things that they're going to need for tools to be able to do their job. And that would be the recreation coordinator is doing the programming, is what I'm understanding this to be. The recreation manager is the person that knows the entire business of the facility. How close am I to this?
Yeah, that's spot on. So the manager would be looking at things like the budget, capital planning, making sure that things are coming in on budget. They'd be communicating with the public services director to see if there's any needs that need to come to the city council. I think the model works well, or it will work well.
Okay,
yeah.
That being said, there's absolutely no sense in my mind whatsoever to have an asset to the community that has a value of at least $7 million with $1.5 million annually to have to keep the thing running and have a manager that would be part-time.
If I may, Mr. Mayor, I would absolutely concur with that. I would also note, and this has been a little high horse that I've been on, we have a lot of equipment. It's a facility that has physical activity And safety in that building is a prime concern. You've always got liability hanging over you. I don't want liability, I want safety, so that people can safely be there. And a manager would be there all the time, would oversee all of that and be responsible for it, would spot things that somebody part-time wouldn't see because they wouldn't frankly be on the job. So it makes a lot of sense to go this route.
Anybody else? Councilmember Johnson?
Well, I'm glad that we're not acting on this tonight, because the Personnel and Budget Committee has only looked at this one time. It was introduced on November 28th, and we had scheduled a meeting November 30th for further discussion, and we didn't have that because of an illness. So we need more processing time on the Personnel and Budget Committee. I have a lot of questions. One in particular is that we had a different model until the previous recreation director and community ed director resigned and took another job. In the meantime, we hired a coordinator that was going to mesh with that position. So we're making a significant change in what our vision was for the position, and that needs to be discussed, particularly in the area of leadership. The community center study we did came back, and what I got out of it was there was a need for more time for leadership, for strategic planning, for influencing people, inspiring people to make program changes, to use data to make decisions, a lot more leadership. Now, Jasper and I mentioned, we've had a discussion today a little bit about that. Jasper sees the director position as the leader and the manager position as a manager. And I would argue that any position can be a leader. You influence others, you use data to make decisions, you make changes. It isn't just at the director level that we should be expecting leadership. So we need to hash this out in personnel and budget. We need to take a look at a job description that relates to how this person's going to interact with the program coordinator, which is the new position. We need to talk about the maintenance and coordinator. There's a lot more discussion that's needed. I'm not throwing cold water on what's being proposed. This is one option, but we need to process it and discuss it.
Anybody else?
If I may, Mr. Mayor, the only thing I would say at this point too is that with regard to the budget, I think we need to plan as though it's going to be a full-time position. And we can back off from that later, but we need to have that in place so we can move forward.
I would concur. So the 32,000 that we're looking at, we have in 2019 budget is specifically right now designated for a manager position. We keep that in the budget for the idea for the Personnel and Budget Committee to do some further analysis on this, bring it back to the full city council. The one issue that I had regarding this recreation program discussion, quite frankly, was the whole idea of maintenance and the custodial piece, but Jasper's already indicated to us in regards to what his plan is on that, and that was certainly something that we want to talk about at the Personnel and Budget Committee as well. So is there any other questions that anybody has on this, or is this something that we can take back to the Personnel and Budget Committee, do some further analysis and be able to present?
I just want to say that, you know, nobody accepts a management position without the idea that they're not going to be a leader. And we've already hired people in Jasper underneath our directors that are managers, that are currently doing great jobs at actually managing the personnel that are there. That's part of leadership. And you know quite quickly when leadership isn't working, and that's when you have a breakdown from the bottom going up. And if you always do what you always did, you always get what you always got. And the whole purpose of this is making changes to increase the performance of the facility. One of the things that I can see us needing in the future, and that's going to come down to the recreation coordinator and the recreation manager, is that you're going to need trainers. You know, you've got all of this equipment, but you don't have people that are actually in there and training, and those are hired guns that you wind up interviewing and bringing in. They're the idea that you're going to have a trainer that is an employee is almost not going to happen. Generally, they're going to travel from one or have several different places that they work with, and be training here or there and in different around in the community. Because
programming,
well, it's not just programming. This is working with the equipment making sure that they're using it correctly so that people don't injure themselves. Sometimes they'll contract with a person to be a personal trainer while in the facility. They can set up times and dates that they're going to be there. But you need to establish those relationships so that you get these trainers in. Some of these trainers are going to be in particular areas that other trainers aren't. But you look at some of the programming that's going out there nowadays, and you can have one program that's going to run 40 minutes and have up to 5 or 6 trainers because they're packing in 30 people into one exercise segment. They're called HITs. It's high intensity training. And when you get into something like that, you need to have more than one person there to be able to watch and make sure that people aren't hurting themselves when they're doing things. The idea that it's just somebody that's gonna not be leading, or that the recreation coordinator is going to just be handling smaller things. The idea is if you're going to bring in more members and increase membership, which increases revenue, so that we're not paying $500,000 in the hole out of our general fund every year. To do that, you have to have retention, and for retention, you have to have people that know what it is that they're doing. And that's what I see us doing in this, in hiring the way that we're hiring.
Anybody else have anything? Councilor Johnson.
Another question that needs to be hashed out. If the public services director is going to have a part of his or her time to supervise the position, is that an increased cost for the community center then? A portion of that person's time? Is that another budget consideration in this whole thing? I understand it wouldn't increase overall, but it could increase the budget for the community center. Is that correct?
It could. I haven't looked at that to see if there is. I mean, part of the public services director salary comes out of the general fund right now. It's split across basically everything because there's a streets and parks component that's non-enterprise. So I think the idea would be that would be encompassed in that as well. So I don't see an increase, but I could look at it a little bit closer.
Well, with this not being an actionable item, I think our marching orders are to go ahead and bring it back to the Personnel and Budget Committee. We'll do some further analysis, and we'll be able to go ahead and present this probably, I'm guessing, sometime in January, so that a decision can be made regarding the full-time position. But for safekeeping, we want to make sure that we keep the $32,000 within the budget as a placeholder right now. Fair enough?
Yep.
Okay. Let's move on to line item 6, Bravo, which is the Law Enforcement Labor Services, otherwise known as the LELS contract.
Mayor Haig, members of the City Council, before you is in agreement with the LELS Local 137 group. It consists of 5 police officers here in the city of Sueur. We've looked at this. I've had, I believe, 6 meetings with the group in negotiations. I've had, I believe, 2 meetings with Personnel and Budget talking about various requests and aspects of what they had. This was on the agenda, I believe, 3 weeks ago, roughly 2.5 weeks ago. And it was pulled because the officers wanted to talk about a couple other things before they voted on it. So they have voted on it. They have approved it as is. I want to go through the components of it with the group right now. So this is a 3-year contract. We've had 2-year contracts in the past. This is a 3-year contract. The risk is with a 3-year contract that 3rd year you don't necessarily know what's going on economically. We've had this conversation in the open that if things go poorly economically, we'll have to enter into some negotiations about what that means for the contract. We have defined what compensatory time is in there, that we noticed that that wasn't defined, and it's a major component of things that have changed in the contract. So compensatory time is now capped at 100 hours annually, and is paid out annually. So what that means is that the group, if they work overtime above and beyond their 12-hour shift that they have, or they have a court date, they can have the choice to either get paid in overtime or get it paid in comp time, or get it added to their comp time bank, which they can use as paid time off. Right now, what the policy or what the contract states is that they can have at the most 80 hours at any given time, and then there's a carryover period in November, December for comp time. That's administratively difficult to track. So what we've done is we've capped it at 100 total hours for comp time, and if they don't use that, then it will be paid out into their post-healthcare post-healthcare savings account. So what that does administratively is that we don't have to manage the carryovers from year to year. It gave the group another means of putting money into their healthcare savings account, and it also limits the hours that our full-time officers are off because we put a cap at 100 hours. So what that means is that if they hit their 100-hour cap for the year, they don't have the choice to either do comp time or overtime. It just automatically is paid as overtime. So there's been numerous adjustments in the contract to reflect the practice of 12-hour shifts. In the previous contract, there were a lot of references to 8-hour shifts. We've defined what the Christmas Eve half day is. We've added a PTO buyout program. So what that program is, and that's new, it's something that we talked about at personnel and budget, just from the non-union employees, is that once a year an employee can choose to request to buy out some of their PTO. And what some of the stipulations are is that you can't dip below 200 hours of PTO. So you need at least 200 hours or something above 200 hours to request this. That's kind of a safeguard to say, well, you need some PTO for possible medical things like that. It's kind of, allowing them to not draw down their bank, their PTO bank, kind of prematurely. So that's one of the stipulations. And when they do that, it's not paid out as income, it's transferred tax-free into their post-employment healthcare savings plan. It's another option for them to get money into their healthcare savings plan. One thing that was added was the employer pays 25% of dental coverage. Now dental coverage is not that much. This is equated to about $1,250 a year. So this was added. And then the wage scale update, which I'll spend some more time on, because that's kind of the keystone piece of this, we'll talk about that in a little bit. So we'll look at the wage scale, a little history about this. In 2015, we had a compensation and classification study that defined and scored a police officer as a grade 9 employee. Now, when they looked at the pay scale in 2015 and looked at the union contract, there were some big differences between what a police officer was getting paid. The 2017-2018 LS contract partially made up for that wage gap. So it got closer to what a grade 9 employee is. And then in the 19 to 21 LS contract before you tonight aligns a police officer with a full grade 9 employee. So it follows that comp and class study classification and that scoring of that position. There was some confusion from the previous contracts about what they were going to be. I made it very clear that what we have in the contract is what it is, and we'll follow the tables that are in the contract. So what they have and what that means is roughly about a 6.1% increase from 2018 to 2019. That is including basically what's in the budget tonight for the non-union employees is a 3% COLA increase. So roughly that's a 3.1% adjustment to their salary to get them more in line with a grade 9 employee. Now, I'll pull this table up, and this is in your packet as well. It's looking at 5 other communities within the region. Personnel and Budget came up with these comparisons. It looks at what the starting pay is and what the top pay is. The third and fourth columns look at the differences. What you'll see is that just in general, the wage comparisons were under most of our comparable cities. And then one component that personnel and budget wanted to look at was the health insurance contributions. And what we looked at is comparing those, and then we kind of did a summation of those and looked at what the differences are. So currently, you'll see that basically the only one we're really comparable to, or two, are the starting wages for Glencoe and New Prague. And that's not including if they were going to have any sort of COLA increases for this year or anything like that. So this is just looking at 2018 numbers. If you look at what the proposal is, looking at what the starting pay is, and now this is where I have assumed some increases for Jordan. So on the starting pay end, there's a 3% assumption, and then the top end, it stays the same. So what you'll see is that we're kind of in the middle, again, with the wages. The Sueur starting wage is, in the ballpark of Jordan, Glencoe, Belle Plaine. It's still a little off from St. Peter and New Prague. And then the top end, you can see we're well above Glencoe, but we're, within, $3,000 to $6,000 of the top end for the other four entities. So, looking at this and comparing this and what the request was, I think it's fair. The 6.1% increase is kind of, you have to take a second look at it because it is substantial. But when looking at the comparable cities, I think it's justified to make sure that we can retain and recruit police officers, which is becoming more and more challenging to hire in that market. So what we're looking at, I'll entertain any questions you may have about the LELS group contract. Again, the officers have looked at this and they have approved this unanimously. And what we're looking for, if council chooses, is a motion to approve the contract as described in the agenda packet for the time frame of 2019 through 2021. So with that, I'll entertain any questions.
I just wanted to add that the health insurance, the annual health insurance, was looked at very carefully by the Personnel and Budget Committee as well. We wanted to know what the comps were for the other communities, so it's more than just what the salaries were. Any questions? Councilmember Johnson.
It might help, do you recall, Jasper, offhand, what the total, you have, how many officers, what the total package increase is? I think you gave us a ballpark figure of that.
Well, are you looking at a percentage or at a total?
A dollar.
A dollar amount, I can't think, I know I did give that to you guys on Wednesday. Can't think of it off the top of my head. So it'd be 6.1%. I could reverse engineer it here shortly, but
Okay. And the reason we're not talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars here, we're talking about a few $1,000s.
yeah, we have a small group, and this is a modest increase, but with 5 officers, it's spread out. It's not a lot of money on a. If you look at the budget for the police department, it's over $1 million, and this is a very small portion of it. This increase would be.
Jasper, if you would you speak to the managed that on a 3-year contract, please?
Yeah, so administratively, we're not having to negotiate 2 years here, so that's helpful. It gives us more solidity with the group itself because they now are locked into a 3-year contract. So from an employment standpoint, it's attractive to them. Administratively, it's less burdensome to manage. The idea is that if something does happen where we have to have a conversation in the future, both parties have verbalized that we would have that. So I think the risk is minimized, and I think it's warranted. If the economy stays somewhat stable, I think that this is the way to go. If it doesn't, we can always open it back up.
Anybody else have any questions or concerns?
Mayor, if I may, I move that we approve the contract.
We have a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any additional discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion is carried. We now move on to line item 6, Charlie, which is the 2019 budget, the utility rate and fee schedule adoption.
Mayor Haig, members of City Council, we'll go through a long process here. We've got Zach Dowd, the Consulting Finance Director here. We kind of broke this up into 4 parts. The first part will be the general levy. We'll do the truth and taxation hearing. We'll open it up for public comment and close it, and then take questions from city council on the budget. Then we'll roll into the utility funds, we'll look at those rates and we'll look at those budgets, we'll approve or consider approval of those. Then we'll move into the capital improvement plan, capital equipment plan that's in your packet. What we're looking for in the first two, I'll just say there's resolutions for those that need to be passed. The CIP, CEP, that would just be a motion, that's just a guiding document. Anything in there has to be approved through city council, through the means of our purchasing policy. And then lastly is our governmental fee schedule and our building department fee schedule. And that has a resolution as well. So with that, I'll turn it over to Zach. If there's questions that come up during this, feel free to ask Zach, because there's a lot of information here. Zach might go back to me and ask me specifics on things, I think in particular with utility billing and the enterprise budgets. We do have the public services director here too, if there are questions. I just want to make sure all the questions that this group has, we get to talk about. So with that, I'll turn it over to Zach Dowd.
Welcome, Zachary.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the City Council, and City Administrator Krugel for having me in tonight. I see I already made an error in my 2018 budget, it's actually 2019 budget, so it's starting out well. Go on to the next slide, just so we didn't forget about that. So I do want to lay out the agenda. We had previous workshops, obviously, before the September 10th meeting. We had multiple workshops, multiple personnel budget committee meetings that I and City Administrator Krugel attended, and we discussed and had, so it's a very long process. We started this in about June or July. Overall process with staff, and then going to city council, personnel budget committee meetings. And we did approve the preliminary levy in budget on September 10th of this year. We are looking to do the final levy in budget after public comment tonight on December 10th. And then by the end of the month, I will certify the final levy to the Sueur County and to the state and take care of any other checklist items that we need to do in order to get a levy approved and certified for next year. There has been multiple meetings between September and December as well. I think we had 2 or 3 personnel budget committee meetings, along with utility rate things as well. So it's not just doing a couple meetings. We've met 4, 5, 6, 7 times. So. All right. So anything crazy happened in the legislation this year that's going to impact us? No. So 2 years ago, I think there was a significant change in LGA, which I know that there was nothing this year in 2018. I'm just noting that should be pretty stable. We do receive about $1 million from LGA.
Yes. Just jump.
Yeah.
I think for the viewing audience, they need to know what these acronyms mean.
Sure.
LGA and PERA.
Sure. So LGA is local government aid. It's a granting system that is set up by the state in order to fund smaller communities, so it's not such a large property tax levy impact on residents themselves. It's some formula. I'm not sure how the formula is created because Minneapolis, I think, is the greatest user of LGA and receiver of LGA, but they're also the largest community, so I don't really know how the calculation works, but somehow works in our favor, so we get about $1 million of LGA. I know that they cut that back in the late 2000s, just because of budget cuts and such, but they have reinstated it, so we are a significant receiver of LGA or local government aid. PERA is the Public Employees Retirement Association, and those contribution levels remain stable. There are some talks about 2020 having some changes with those. The reason why that's put up there is because PERA has been underfunded, or noted that it's been underfunded. So basically what that means in total is that the number of retirees is drawing down the balance faster than it's being replenished by the people who are actually working. So because it's been underfunded, they're basically saying that the cities and small local governments, school districts are having to contribute more to the PERA. But those levels remain stable and are thought to maybe increase a little bit, which increases our portion because 6.5% of everyone's paycheck that works here goes to that PERA, but also 7.5% of that person's paycheck is paid for by the city. So a total of about 14% is paid for to PERA by the city and every person's paycheck. So that should be known that those levels may increase, but for now are stable. And then the competitive bidding threshold, what this means is that previously we'd have to, if anything was over $100,000, we'd have to look at it and make sure that we got more than one bid. It went through the certain processes. We put it up for publication. We had sufficient information from them. We had different types of insurances on those things. But now they've changed it to $175,000. I believe that's just because the number of contracts and stuff that are over $100,000 now just seems to be more than it needs to be. I mean, before $100,000 could get you, you know, I guess a good truck or whatever else, or some dump trucks or snow plows, whatever, but really now $100,000 doesn't get you a whole lot. It seems like a lot of money, but it doesn't get you a whole lot nowadays, so. They did raise it to 175. No, it doesn't combine with what our purchasing policy says, and we are at, I believe our purchasing policy is 100,000, is that right? Or is
No, we increased it.
No, we have amended our purchasing policy, we're at 175.
Okay, yep, so that's when we align with the legislative impacts then. So for reference in the whole process of this thing, and the reason why I do this reference thing is because I do it right away so that everyone knows what 1% means in both areas of impact. So 1% tax impact, what the impact is like, would say your home value increased 6% and the levy increased 5%. So the difference between those two is 1%. That 1% means that your household taxes would go down $14 or $15. So the impact is the difference between how much your home value increased and your overall value increases and the levy increases. So those can be either way. So the levy can increase more than your home, which would mean that it's a positive impact, which means you pay more per 1% for the year. And it could be other way as well. So if your home value increases by 5% and again the levy is 4%, you lose $14 to $15 per year on the average household. Now that does change because an average household is 160,000, or I think it's 165, but it's very close to the 160 range. So that should be known as well. Obviously, if you have a $320,000 home, you can just double those things, and that'll be about your impact for 1%. 1% tax levy. So overall, we try to, our levies are right around 2.5 million, $2 million or so. Overall, 1% of that is $24,000. So, 1% tax levy increase isn't a huge dollar amount for us. Basically, that's what should be known is that when we increase it 1%, we're only getting $24,000. If you think back to the bidding thing I just mentioned, $100,000 is basically 4%. So it's not a whole lot of money for us in the city. CPI, so net last year to this year, so if we increased by CPI alone, we'd have 2.36%. So what's that, about 55, 60 grand dollars just to increase, just to keep up with CPI and have the same amount of stuff that we had last year in this year's budget.
CPI?
Consumer Price Index. So it's a bundle of goods purchased by the government consistently. So it's like milk and the needed things. Just to keep up with that, we'd have to increase it 2.36%. So just to keep up with things, same old. So looking at the 2018 levy and looking at what's proposed for 2019, this is down from the preliminary stuff. So the preliminary information you did get on your tax statement is higher than what it will be if this budget is approved. We always shoot high, and the reason I always shoot high for cities is because we're able to lower the tax levy before the final is approved, but we have to have basically that ceiling amount. And the reason why that ceiling amount is known is because so that they can send it on a property tax statement so that everyone knows what their worst impact could be for their home if they had the highest taxes. Now, most of the time that I work with cities, they've either been at that or they've lowered it. And most of the time they do lower it because we always have extra money in there for health insurance because we don't know that in September. We also don't know COLA. We also don't know if final projects are being done or what needs to be done for final projects. And if any debt service things are staying open, which we don't have any this year, but if any bonds are not issued yet, we wouldn't know debt schedules. So we have to keep those things high, and that's why we shoot high. So I think it was in the 9.5-ish range for the preliminary levy. It's down to 6.29%. So in total, breaking down by line item, we had a $162,000 decrease in the general fund. Most of it has to do with allocation changes, as we change allocation changes within salaries and such. And then also some decreases amongst what we budgeted for. The big one that we had was the building official that we expected to be at the high end of the top range of the building official. We ended up hiring somebody who didn't have much experience, so we had them much lower. So that lowers our budgeted amount from what we had in 2018 to 2019. Just now knowing that what we have versus not knowing what we have. So that's a $162,000 decrease. Community center stayed very stable, $6,200. This does include the recreational manager in there as the position, so it should be known as well. The big change and the big increase is for the capital improvement plan, and that'll be talked about tonight as well, the CIP plan, which I believe is in 2 items. But then that's a big increase, that's $340,000. And the reason for that is because we're trying to plan for the future. We don't want to have to do debt, as you can see the number of debt services that we have. within this community. We don't wanna have to levy for debt. We don't have to, we can plan for the future. So this council has made it a big motive and an objective of theirs to plan for the future, which I think is very good. So that amount of money is being used just for planning in the future. So, go ahead.
Zach, you had mentioned to me before the meeting that you did a little research on bonded debt in communities in Minnesota. Could you kind of talk about that a little bit to see where we're at?
Sure. So, I looked on the Office of the State Auditor's website. I did this for another city of mine that they have, part of their TNT meeting is to go through and compare themselves to other cities to show how low they are with expenditures. And so I was,
TNT is what?
Truth and Taxation meeting. So that's what we are at tonight. The OSA, or the Office of the State Auditor, is we're all cities. I think there's 229 or 230 cities within the state that have to submit their financial statements, so they're able to be reviewed and compared to each individual other city. So they're 2 years or a year behind, so their 2016 is the most current information that they had. But when I was going through there, I said, I'm going to look at Sueur because we've never done this before. Let's look at it and see where we're at. Just because it goes on a per capita. So they have a total amount of expenditures, and then they also have a per capita. So it compares a Minneapolis to us, or a Mankato, or a city of Duluth or something. Compares to us based on the number of population. So we can compare per person how much are we spending. And we are 36 out of 229. So that's very near the top of communities that pay for debt service. So we are super, super heavy debt laden, and which I think was a very astonishing fact for me, because most of the cities of this size are in the lower, higher 180s, I guess, 180, 190, maybe 200s, depending on how much debt they have. But this community is 36 out of 229, which is meaning that we need to not have as much debt, and that's been a great thing for this council to try to plan for the future. So it was a nice little tidbit fact.
Yes, so what that means is, you can see on here, you'll see on the levy debt service amounts, you'll see that from 2018 to 2019, we had one bond, the 2008 AGO tax abatement bonds, they fell off. As those fall off and as we go along, city council will have to evaluate to see once, do we want to continue to do bonded debt, or do we want to move some of that money into capital planning and things like that, or maybe invest it? Those are decisions that you guys will have to make. Now it's all dependent on the projects that we have at hand. There's going to be projects out there that we're going to have to bond for because of just their scale. So those things will be out there, but we will have some bonded debt falling off in the next 5 to 8 years that we'll have to look at and see how we want to handle that. So that'll be something, and it's a good thing to evaluate as a council.
So overall, the EDA is limited to 0.0185% of our total market value, so that increased $200 just to get it to the max amount that we were able to levy for that. So a total of 6.29% or $151,000 is the proposed tax levy for tonight. Again, most of it has to do with planning for the future, capital improvement plan. If you offset that increase with the decrease in the general fund alone, that's about $150,000 change. So what does this mean for everyone in their home values? So basically what this means is that we had about a 1%, a 1.15% tax impact decrease for everyone with their homes, as long as your home stayed the same value. Now I leave that as a kind of an open item, because your home probably did not stay the same value based on the tax capacity increase, and that's on the next slide, next 1 or 2 slides here. But if it did stay the same, you'd see a $15 decrease in the amount of taxes that you paid to the city. Now, when I get information from the county, I only get a gross amount, so I never get what individual parts are increasing and decreasing, besides maybe it's residential or maybe it's commercial, but I don't know. I know that there's some homes that go up and some homes that go down, so it's just an average. I can't break it down. Other than that, I give what the county gives me, and I use that information to give the best information that I possibly can to the city council.
And just to be clear, this is the city of Sueur, has nothing to do with the county or the school referendums.
No, it does not. Yeah, so this is strictly your amount of taxes that we paid on the home value based on the tax rate of the city of Sueur. So this is just the city portion, not anything to do with county or school district or anything else. So here's the numbers, like I said, this is what I get from the county. I get a breakdown of basically what type of industry or what type of property it is, and then how much money is the tax capacity. So what Minnesota state statute limits us to is 10% of the tax capacity, or 10% of the tax value of your home is actually taxed. So of that, let's just do simple math on the $1.599 million of residential property, that's tax capacity. We have about $15,990,000 of market value homes in this community. So we're only able to tax 10% of those. That's a statute by Minnesota State. So I, again, can't touch that. But what it is portioned is at 1%. So then on a commercial industrial property, it's actually 1.5%. So a commercial industrial property, even though it might have less value, is actually taxed 1.5 times, if not more than that, than a residential property. So a residential property, and I know a business owner, customer of Lease understands that it's taxed a lot higher than a residential property is. So having those businesses in town, which we have quite a few of, help us tremendously in our tax capacity amounts and help us with our tax rate. So that caused our 8.13% tax capacity increase from 2018 to 2019. So comparing other cities around us to go, what's my tax rate compared to anybody else? So what these are numbers based on the ending 2018 tax rates. I tried to get 2019 preliminary rates from the county, and I never got them back. So I have the preliminary numbers for Sueur, are actual preliminary numbers based on the preliminary levy, not based on the final levy that is going to be approved tonight. Those are just preliminary levy numbers. So that is a little higher than what it will end up being. But if we compare ourselves to, we're right around Kilkenny, 78.352. We're not quite as low as maybe a Mankato, and the reason for that is because economies of scale. As soon as you get more people within an area, obviously the taxes go way down and the tax rate goes way down, even though we don't need that same amount of money. So we are lower if you compare us to the cities around us. Lease Center, Cleveland, Montgomery, we're right around that area, maybe a little lower than them. And that's, I think, is astonishing because of the fact amount of debt we have. If we're 36 out of 229 per capita, we should have a lot higher tax rate than 78%, to be honest, if I'm looking at a city like that. So it's astonishing, and what helps us is the commercial industrial businesses that we have in town. So we treat them right, and they treat us right by keeping our tax rate low. So I just wanted to show a comparison of where we have been and where we're going. So like I said, we were about $2.5 million for our proposed 2019 levy. We were at about, in 2014, lower than $1.7 million. What we've done every single year is increase services, increased the amount of staff, and able to reach the residents overall. We've had slow increases. There's been nothing that's really changed us drastically up or down. The portion that's in the blue is the general levy, so that's actually the portion that funds the general fund. City Hall here, streets and parks, police officers is a big one. If you add any of those individuals, those are strictly 100% general levy fund dollars. And I don't know any history past 2016 because that's when I was brought on to this community, so I couldn't tell you anything previous to that. But it looks like there was a significant jump in 2015 to 2016, and I don't know exactly what those are, but I'm assuming something going to change in personnel would make those huge changes. But green is debt service. So as you can see, it's about a third, maybe a little less, maybe a quarter of that bar is debt service. It's getting less and less, which means because we haven't taken any debt out, it's lowered that debt service amount. We did take one out in 2017 for a street reconstruction fund and bond, but we have also released the debt as well. So because we released that old debt, that new debt was able to offset those. The red bar is EDA levy. We implemented that in 2017 in order to pay for a community development director, which we thought was an essential point to this city to keep the businesses in town happy and keep them moving forward and help them as much as possible. So that was implemented in 2017. Tax capacity rates. So those are tax rates that were in past, and then obviously where we are today. 2016 was 73. We've been up to 78, and this year it's actually going to go down. So we'll go down because we had an 8.13% tax capacity increase, but only 6.29% levy increase. So those differences make a 1.6% tax rate decrease, which is I think the number one priority for everyone is we want to grow with our city. So the tax rate and what that does is looks over years to see, are we growing with our city, or are we growing too fast for our city, or are we growing too slow for our city? Every city wants to grow with theirs. Every city government at least wants to grow with theirs. As theirs grows, as the city grows, we want to grow as well to provide more services for the residents. If we had an increase last year in 2017 or 2018 from 2017, but we have a decrease this year, which means that we're keeping up with our community and that we are not growing too fast for them either. Yes.
If I could talk just a tad about tax capacity, because it can get kind of muddled up a little bit. One of the major components that we're focusing on is housing and getting more houses in. And from 2017 to 2018, we went from 1 building permit to 7. Now that has a direct impact. If you take the value of those 7 homes, you times it by 0.1, that's what our tax capacity increase is for those houses. So you can see a direct impact with building houses and what our tax capacity is. As we build more houses, and that's why you see like Mankato, they have a lot of houses, your tax rate, which we're showing up here, that'll go down. So the larger your city gets, your tax rate, because you have more people, will likely go down. Now there's other components in there. But that also takes into account apartments, businesses, and residential housing. So keep that in mind. As our tax capacity increases, our tax rate will go down, and one of the major components to that is housing.
Thank you. So what happened in the general fund overall to make those changes happen? We had a condemnation proceedings, which is something that the city council has administered. We started that in 2018. Is to increase that to $50,000. I believe it was $25,000 in 2018, if I'm not mistaken. But that's to help basically keep a good visual condition for the city. We want to, if new potential residents are coming in, we don't want the city to look bad. We want it to look in good visual condition. So setting that at $50,000 gives us money to take care of those homes and take care of them, basically make it that they're in good visual condition. We set the contingency at $100,000. That's the same as last year. We combined the Streets and Parks Department to allow for easier managing and more efficiencies within the both departments. So we have some shared labor that did bring down the costs, as we don't have to have 2 separate departments, and we can share those resources much better. An overall decrease of expenditures of $146,000. That has to do with some reallocation of salaries mostly, and it also has to do with the building department, as well as when you get a first new employee, you have to start them out with computers and desks and all that other stuff. Along with the fact that we had a lot more budget for that building official when we first put them in the budget than what we have now. What increased in the general fund? So this is the opposite effect. So everything that increases in the revenue will drive down that tax levy. So we back into the tax levy number by saying, what do we need to balance the budget? Whatever the expenses are, we need to reduce the revenues, and whatever the difference between the expenses and the revenues are, that's what our tax levy is. So we had an increase in building permits of $15,000, so that's a direct effect on the levy. We will decrease the levy by $15,000. We had a steady LGA dollars, those went up about $2,000, so I think we're at $977 now for the LGA, or local government aid. We had decreased, so the Small Cities Assistance Grant was pushed through legislation in 2017. We were able to get some money there. It's about $30,000. What that Small City Assistance Grant was for putting into streets. It was able to help us put into streets and street maintenance. And so we were able to get that in 2017 and 2018. Legislation did not pass it for 2019. We may still get it depending on, in 2017 they made the legislation to happen right away, effectively. I have heard rumors of a budget surplus at the state, so there may be some more money coming to us in 2019, but those are just rumors at this point, so we'll see. And the operating tax dollars decreased by $162,000. Again, that has to do with the decrease in expenses and an increase in revenues. Key changes in the community center. So only the major changes, again, community center is run by tax dollars as well. But we did keep those very steady this year. There's only a $6,000 increase, which is pretty astonishing for hiring an additional rec coordinator position. So the reorganization of the community centers to better accommodate the needs of the city. Proposes to hire a recreational manager, which we just talked about tonight. And then we also had the hiring of the recreational coordinator in 2018. Some small changes in the rate structure overall. The based on the community center study that was completed. So those are the main changes in the community center overall. General fund revenues, I'm gonna touch briefly on these because, you know, the main decrease is obviously with taxes. We had some license and permits, which is the building permit side of things. Intergovernmental revenue went down from the small cities assistance grant, but went up a little bit because of LGA, or government aid. Charges for services, very flat. Fine and forfeits, very flat. Investment earnings, slightly larger as we try to get some more cash into this city and try to plan for those future projects that we need. As we get more cash in and planning for those future needs, we will have more money invested, which will help us with our investment earnings number. Not a lot, but it's a little bit. Every little bit counts. And then miscellaneous dollars, we have been getting a lot more just miscellaneous refunds. League of Minnesota Cities Insurance Trust gives us a refund mostly every year. That seems to vary every year, so we're planning on a larger one maybe next year, based on how much we paid for League of Minnesota Cities Insurance Trust. What the League of Minnesota Cities Insurance Trust is where we pay for our insurance for our vehicles, for our buildings. If there's not as much used, since it is a government organization, since it's not as much used, then they'll give a refund back based on how much you paid in. So because we pay a larger portion in, we're expecting a larger refund back. And that transfer in is from the electric fund. That has not changed in 30 years. So,
And that's the franchise fee money.
that is correct. So I like graphs, and sometimes graphs like everyone else, and I like numbers. So we'll go with the graph and just kind of show you year over year. So the far left column where the dark blue line is 2017 actual and where we end up. 2018 budget is the middle number, and then the far right one, or the lighter column, is your proposed 2019. As you can see, very, very flat across almost all of them except for taxes is the major decrease. I mean, we have already talked about why those decreases occurred. And then I break it down into a pie graph because people don't like bar graphs. I make a pie graph to make sure everyone understands what's going on. Intergovernmental revenue and taxes in the transfer in make up a majority of our revenue sources in the general fund. License and permits a little bit, and then some miscellaneous dollars, like I said, League of Minnesota Cities Insurance Trust, donations, so on and so forth.
I just make a quick comment.
Yes.
The largest source of revenue is the IGA, the intergovernmental aid, 40%. And when
Yes.
that was cut off during the recession,
Yes,
a lot of things didn't happen as a result of that.
correct. Yeah, if you take away 40% of your graph and you don't have 40% of your pie to feed everyone with, it makes it a little harder. You start shaving a little bit.
So like Newell mentioned a couple of meetings ago, the politics and the staying in tune with what's going on in the legislature, the paying attention to the economy, it's a bigger deal than just the taxes in Sueur.
Correct, yeah. Obviously, if we didn't have to, we'd have to approximately double our taxes amount. So that takes our tax rate to double, just to get it so that we're able to fund the same operations we do now.
But in the recession, we didn't double taxes. The
Correct.
taxes were even decreased to some extent, but that didn't provide the money to make changes and improvements that we've been able to look at in the last several years.
That's
So I think
correct.
that history's gotta be kept in mind because sometimes history repeats itself and
Hoping not.
LGA may change for the worse in the future.
You never know. But that's what I mean. So that's why keeping an eye on the legislation and making sure we're looking at those legislation impacts is huge for us as a small city because we rely so much on that LGA dollars.
Except the difference between then and now is that we have a city council and a mayor and a city administrator that recognize that we need to start putting money away from the future for when things like that happen. We can plan for fixing our roads and so on. However, if you want to wind up into a recession, the money or the funds that you have for building the new roads is for the maintenance of the roads when that money isn't coming in.
Correct.
That's what a lot of people need to understand. It's, the money is there for a reason. When it goes south fast and it goes south hard. And having the money there is what it's supposed to be for.
And we learned that lesson.
Yep.
Correct. So let's talk, instead of revenues, let's talk about expenditures. Again, the main changes I've talked about already, but general government, the main decrease there is changes of allocations. Again, your plan is to hire a finance director, a full-time finance director in 2019. I, as a consultant with AEM Finding Solutions, would go away. The change in those is relatively net impact zero, except for the fact that my contract was 50% general fund funded, and I believe the new finance director is 30% funded by the general fund, just based on the number of enterprise funds we have. So that is a decreased impact on the general fund, general government area.
for the benefit of the citizens that are here, what are the enterprise funds?
The enterprise funds we'll talk about in a few moments, the next item, but it is your water, your sewer, your electric fund, stormwater, and refuse. Those 5 enterprise funds are basically run separately from the city and are supposed to be individual businesses within themselves, which are to sustain themselves. They're not able to use tax dollars to fund those operations. So public safety, very net change, has to do with some maintenance items and some small personnel items, but nothing major. Public works, the main increase there is because of the fact we combined public works and park and recreation. So if we combined those 2 last year, it's a very small change. And we're able to just make it one line item, makes it easier for managing, easier for combining staff, using staff higher if we need them in parks or if we need them in public works. Less of that animosity happens when you have the same department. Library utilities didn't increase at all, and we don't transfer out anymore. What we did before was had a Johnson Control loan. We still have that loan, but instead of making more paperwork, I decided that I'd make more paperwork if I don't have to. So I'll just move the money right to the Johnson Control loan for taxes right away, instead of putting it into the general fund and then transferring it out. It makes no sense to me to make more paperwork. So that was done in 2017. It's part of the 2018 one. We got rid of it and continue to do that same thing. So you'll see no transfers out next year. Another graph showing where we're at compared to where we were before. The major changes, again, general government, has to do with the reallocation of the future finance director and myself as AEM. And then the biggest one increase is public works, and that's just taking the park and recreation and basically stacking that middle blue line on top of the public works line in the middle there. So no major changes.
If I may,
Councilmember Croker, please.
Zach and
Yes.
City Administrator Jasper, let's talk a little bit about the bang for the buck with a full-time financial director, particularly comparing to what we get now paying AEM, your employer, and how much time we get from you compared to if we have a full-time.
Sure.
And if I may, Zach, correct me if I'm wrong, I think the contract that we have right now is for just over $72,000 a year.
That's correct.
So, and what we get for that is we get Zach to come to City Hall, generally once a week. Sometimes it's twice a week. Sometimes there's something going on where he doesn't show up. But on average, it's roughly 1 time a week. But I do call, email, text Zach pretty regularly when he's not here. So we have that. I'm sorry about that. We have that ability to communicate. So it's not just he's doing work here when he's here. It's all the time. But what we're getting, if we do have a full-time finance director, for that increase, basically it's $72,000 up to about $118,000 to $120,000, depends on where that comes in. That's the benefits package with salary. We're going from 1 day a week to 5 days a week, a full-time position. So we're increasing the amount of time that's put in towards our finances by 80%, and that's one of our long-term goals is to be more financially sound as a city, and having that person there really would help out with that aspect. One other thing that it would really help out with is redundancy within the city. If you noticed, pretty much every audit that we've ever gotten, there is I forget what it's called, delegated segregation of duty, that we always get a finding on, but for cities our size, it's common. Now, we will likely still get that finding, even if we add one person to the whole mix, but in a situation where, let's just say, our utility billing coordinator is out for an extended period of time, we would then have a finance director that could fill in for that role. That just so happened, and we ran into some staffing issues, so it would help out quite a bit with that. Just in general, having another set of eyes and somebody on staff for a full-time 40 hours a week in that finance area would be helpful, I think, for all of the directors, helpful for myself, and I think that, I won't say that it'll pay for itself, but over time, we will be more financially sound as a city.
Sounds good. And then to figure out where we spend our money at per year, it's pretty even. A little more with public safety, obviously, because it's 100% funded with any police officer. So 100% funded by the general fund. That's about a third, public works and the general government overall.
So with that, I'll take over. Thank you, Zach, down. What we're gonna need to do is open up a public hearing, see if anybody here wants to express any comments about the general levy that we have proposed. If there are, we have to document those comments, and after the public hearing, city council will have the opportunity to have the discussion. So with that, I'll turn it over, and after the public comment, we will have a discussion. If there's any questions at that time, that would be the time to ask myself or Zach.
I'll entertain a motion to go ahead and open the public hearing for truth in taxation.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion is carried. Does anybody from the public wish to address city council regarding truth in taxation?
You're no.
Seeing no interest, I'll go ahead and entertain a motion to close the public hearing for truth in taxation.
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion is carried. Okay. Entertain a motion now to approve the budget and resolution as written.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any additional discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion is carried.
All right, thank you, and I will bring Zach back up. We will talk about the utility fund budgets. Zach?
Thank you, Mayor, for City Council again. Nice to see you tonight. Utility revenue by source. So what I will show you is some overview, big picture items that show you where the total dollars come in for each individual, our total utility funds, and then I will go through each individual fund individually, so we can talk about those at that time. So total, about $18 million comes into the city for revenue by different sources. Those main 5 sources are the water, sewer, electric, stormwater, and refuse. I do a pretty pie graph that shows you what percentage of those are basically coming into the city and what portion of those are. But the majority of them, as you can see, the huge number is electric. Our budgeted number next year is about $12 million of electric charges for the service. That's much larger than any other one, but it's also our biggest utility fund that uses the most dollars as well. So, yes.
If anybody is looking for these sheets, they are available at the front. So if anybody needs them, they're available to the public. They were
Sent this afternoon.
Yeah, they were sent this afternoon. So if anybody needs those, pick one up. They go through the budgets for the enterprise funds.
And the 18 million, that alludes to the proposed for 2019 as opposed to the 13.4 million that was spent in 2018.
This is not spent, this is the revenue sources in, but yes,
Sorry,
that is the proposed amount based on the utility rates and utility budgets that will be looked at and reviewed and approved tonight. But that's a significant increase, 35%, but there has been extensive work done on that, so you mentioned approval.
And just to note, in the packet, you'll see the levy and then the CIP, then the utility rate. What we're doing is we're doing the utility rate, then we'll do the CIP and then government. So it's a little different if people are looking to follow along on the packet.
Correct. So those are by sources. So if you want to go to the next picture, you can go and see a pie graph. So here's the pie graph of where our utility revenues come in from. Again, you can see about 2/3 of our revenue for utility funds comes in from electric charges for services. And, it probably will be the same on your utility bill as well. You probably pay 2/3 as that'd be your electric charges. And then sewer charges and water charges are the remaining small amount for stormwater and a small amount for refuse. But those are a tiny portion compared to electric. Again, these are total revenue sources by utility funds. That doesn't mean that the total amount of dollars for water charges is only 9%. Just proportionally how we get our money for utility funds and where those dollars come from. So if you go to the next slide, that shows again the same thing of revenues, but by expenditures. As you can see again, electric is a very large number, about $10 million. And these are just utility expenditures alone. These aren't including any other numbers of capital outlay items, debt service items, other things like that that have to do with, these are just basically operating expenditures that the utility funds have. If you go to the next slide, we can show where the dollars go out to. So again, pretty proportional wise. Electric operating cost is 62%. The other difference between that 66 you saw before and the 62 is that transfers out line item. That's the $500,000 into electric fund franchise fee gives to the general fund and other support it with property taxes. So that's the 66%. So again, it's almost 1-to-1 for how much proportionally we are spending in electric, and we are getting in electric.
Yes. If I may, I just want to point out too, the sewer operating cost includes the almost $1 million bond payment for the
Yes.
wastewater treatment plant, correct?
Yes. Sorry, should have made that known. That's a PFA loan that I have to put in the budget, so otherwise we won't pay that, and that will be good. So.
If I may too, is it correct, Zach, that the income side, you're both commercial, industrial,
Yes.
and residential? It's not all, we're not just looking at residential for everybody's purposes here.
Correct, yeah, so obviously an industrial and commercial user will use way more electric and way more water and a way more sewer than any certain individual resident would ever use.
And there's been some changes made to our schedule, our rate schedule, that we'll
Yes.
be talking about here as well,
Yes,
to reflect that.
correct, yep. So if we go to the next slide, we should start getting into individual summaries. So I tried to make this as big as possible so that you could see it all, but obviously it didn't work. It was bigger than last year's, but still not big enough, I guess, so I'll have to figure out another way to do this. But basically what you need to look at is the main number is the change in net position number. So that's the fourth line item from the bottom. The change in net position number is $105,000. That's basically that's the amount of money that this water fund is setting aside for next year. So yes, it might get all the way down to the bottom right, down the limb right there. The $105,000 number. That's the main number you want to look at least when you're looking at these summaries of funds by utility fund, is how much money is the water fund actually making and putting away till next year. Those include, that's taking out all of our expenses for operations, all of our maintenance items we have, all of our interest we have to pay. That does include bond payments, transfers out that we have, any money we get in for connection fees and new connections, any money we get in for charges for services. How much money is actually getting put away at the end of the year? It's not very much, about $105,000 for us to basically. That's our money that in the general fund side would be called capital improvement that we're able to put away for future purposes. Right now, we're putting away $105,000 basically in the water fund. So it's not a whole lot of money, but it is something. Again, planning more for the future, as 2018 was about $1,000. So we're moving in the right direction to try to put some money away in order to plan for those future things that we don't really know about yet. Yes.
And if I may, we'll go through the capital improvement plan, but for the water, I think we have the most extensive and most expensive items. So that's why you'll see when we go through the rate tables why things are increasing. It's related to wells and above ground storage, water tanks,
Correct. So the other number you need to look at again for those items is the capital outlay item. Capital outlay line item is actually expenses we're going to plan for next year, which is those CIP, CE pay items. So $105,000 is going to go away for future projects. The amount of money, which I believe is $421,000, is for actually next year's projects that are designated based on the CIP, CE plan. It increased significantly. It's because of those main items that we had. So the two items you want to look at again on all of these are going to be the capital outlay and how much we're putting away for future. So I believe I've made a water fund summary and what the rate changes are proposed at. So the main thing that we need to look at is it has a projected positive cash flow, which is a good thing, which we need to save for the future. Positive operating income for 2019. And the increases in rates is based on the needs for capital improvements in the future. This is pretty consistent across all the funds because there wasn't a whole lot of changes. Some salary allocation changes, which is the main one that decreased the general fund. They have to be paid somehow, so the increase comes in the enterprise funds. It has to do with the amount of time that we spend as well. When I'm here on staff, I spend a lot more time on the utility funds than I would really like to sometimes. But that's just what it is, and how much utility funds actually run this city. So the main changes. Again, I'm going to have Jasper touch base on those because he's worked on those a lot more than I have.
Yeah, first thing I'll note is under bulk water, you'll see that the per 1,000 gallon charge doesn't change from 18 to 19. That actually is supposed to go up from $3.50 to $4. We found that error today, and it didn't get added to this. So it'll be consistent with everybody, all the other costs per 1,000 gallons. Now looking at the meter sizes, excuse me. you'll see some substantial increases. And what this is, and we touched base on this briefly on the 26th of November, is that each of these meter sizes allows a certain amount of water through. So there's a maximum flow rate for each one of these meters. And what that does is it puts a demand on our water system. So there's an accessibility charge is what we're calling this. We're transitioning from a meter size or a meter charge, and we're calling it a water accessibility fee. And what it does is it looks at what the potential demand is on the water system based on the meter size. So the larger meter that you have, it's proportionate. It's not a linear increase. So if you go from a 1 inch to a 2 inch, it's not double two. It increases based on a study that we have. So it's based on the actual demand that's on the system. You'll see our previous commercial rates didn't have that type of allocation. And what that really means is that we're now transitioning to a water accessibility fee, which is supposed to include the depreciation cost. And so that fee will eventually accumulate enough funds to cover our depreciation and our capital costs. So that means that no matter what, we'll receive those dollars. And then the actual charge, the $4 per 1,000 gallons, that goes to actually the pumping. So the pumping of the water out of the ground. And it's similar, the similar concept is in sewer as well. So you'll have your accessibility fee, which covers your capital costs and your depreciation, and the per 1,000 cost is supposed to cover the pumping costs and the cost to get that water to your house. Now, because we're transitioning from the old model to the new model, those aren't exactly right, and we'll make that transition over time. In particular with sewer, because our sewer rate is so high per 1,000 gallons, and we'll talk about that after the water. But that's the general idea, is that we're kind of incorporating the fixed costs, the capital costs, the depreciation underneath the accessibility fee, and then the per 1,000 gallon is actually what it costs to pump that water out of the ground and get it to your house or business. And that's the model that we want to go to. We're not quite there. It would have skewed things quite a bit if we would have done just a mass transition. So that's the biggest change. There's documentation to show why the meter charges are the way they are. The percentages are listed in the rate table on what they are. From a 5/8 inch meter to a 1 inch, it's about 135% increase. So you'll see that we've reached out, or we've invited our top 10 users for industrial commercial meters in town. We had an open house with them last week, Thursday, I believe. We didn't get that many to come, but we have communicated with them. We had Hometown Bioenergy was here. Agripeer talked with us about it as well. But we did send letters, and we're open to talk about what this means to all of our industrial and commercial users. Residentially, it affects it a little bit, but not that much. There is an increase. Well, for water, there is an increase, and that's due to the capital projects. But for sewer, the change doesn't affect that much. It actually goes down for residential users. So it's a big concept change. We've talked about it, personnel and budget, and briefly here as well. But it's more of an equitable model for the consumer base here in Sueur, where you're basically paying for your accessibility to water through that accessibility fee. Questions?
Mayor,
Councilmember Sullivan.
can you just address the last two items there? I see the monthly manual meter reading is going down, and then can you explain what the monthly tower rental is, or lease is, sorry?
Yep. So the monthly meter read, I believe, I didn't catch this. I believe it was $10 in 2018. I think originally we had $25, but it is $10. So that means that if somebody can elect to have a meter that doesn't transmit the meter reading through radio waves, if they choose to do that, we charge $10 a month to go out there and manually read those meters. So that's a choice, and I believe we have 2 customers that made that choice in town. The monthly tower lease, so this is something that's come, because we have items on our tower that we're not receiving revenue for right now that we're working through with the county. And two, there's been a request locally from somebody as far as what it would cost to put an antenna on the meter, or on a tower. So, and I think that the private request eventually will be that they want to request it to be put up there for no cost. So we had to assign a cost to that, because what that means is that council will have to approve that, and it'll essentially be forgiven, the cost, if that's what the decision is. So we've developed it. We've looked at what MnDOT charges for towers. I believe MnDOT's at $350 a month. You know, we're at $300. That's what we're proposing. There is a I don't know, a legacy agreement that we have with the county, and I believe that the lease rate 10 years ago was around $300 a month. So we found this, and the lease was never renewed with the county, so we're actually, I think, meeting, or I'm not meeting, Rich is meeting with them tomorrow, I believe, to work that out. So, but yeah, it's to basically put an antenna or something, you know, a cell tower on our water tanks or whatever we have. So looking at that, it could be a revenue generator for the city, for the water fund.
Thank you.
Yep.
The next slide. We'll do the same thing for sewer. It'll look at the main two items like I mentioned before. As you can see, last year our change in that position was negative $522,000. That's not good. We don't want to have less money next year than we had this year. So we have made some changes again, proposed changes in rates, and I'll have Jeff talk about those in a few moments. But again, you can see we're going to plan on making, if everything goes to budget, $143,000. That's for future purposes also. Again, it's about the same as the amount of water, 105 for water, 143 for sewer. This will be the first year I think that we're actually budgeting for, that I can remember, at least when I've been doing this, that change in that position, that number has not been negative. And the reason for that is because we have that $1 million sewer bond payment for the PFA that we pay for. That is such a huge drain on the sewer fund that we're not able to ever right the ship because of that. Again, past administrations and councils and have made decisions on when we need to make cuts and what we need to do, and some of those changes are now coming into effect and now doubling because we're now paying for old projects and we're also trying to plan for the new projects. So those double costs have made sewer rates outrageously high, and city council and city administration is myself know that it's very high, and we're trying to do whatever we can to lower those costs for any of our residents. So you can see that the capital outlay items, $202,000 next year, is up from 2018 of 105, but again, we've had a lot. We need more capital items, so we'll talk about those in CIP again in a second. But as we identify those items, as Rich has come on, we've identified more items that need to be done, and deferred maintenance is never good. If you do deferred maintenance, then always it's more costly at the end. So let's go to the next slide here. We can do the same thing we did last time. Oh, yes, yes.
I'm not sure if I missed what you were saying, but the change in net position, the fourth line from the bottom.
Yep.
The one where the right, the percent change, minus 129%.
The reason why it's negative is because that negative 522 makes the percentage negative. So that negative 522 makes there's no way to adjust the formula to show that percentage doesn't work either way. It's always going to be a negative number divided by something. You know what I mean? I'm taking a negative number and the negative 522. So it looks funny. We really increased it by, I don't know, you could say, technically it'd be like I don't even know, it would be $128% increase. But I don't know what you want to call the percentage, because it's a negative either way. If you take the negative out of it, it makes the number like 1,000%. And that looks ridiculous. Or I could make it negative 128. So I don't know what would be better to show, but
So the minus 129 doesn't really mean much.
If there's ever numbers like that where it goes from negative to positive, the percentage change really doesn't make a difference, because if you take 0% and times 0 by 0, it's still 0. Yeah.
So one thing, if you're looking at these numbers, you'll see, well, geez, we made some money in 2016 and 17, but you have to look up to the operating expenses. We didn't have anything allocated for bond payments. So you'll have to look at what the net position is, change net position, and think, well, we have a $965,000 payment coming out of that. starting in 2018, we started budgeting for having that bond payment, our bonded debt in there. So you'll look at, even when we budgeted this year, we're still gonna show a $522,000 change in that position. Now you look at what our depreciated costs are, or what the depreciation is, it's $525,000. So we broke even if you take out depreciation. In 2019, what will happen is we're accounting for the bond. We're going to make $143,000 taking into account depreciation. So that'll be the first year that we've ever done that. We've been in the black.
Yeah.
Which is a big deal because we've really dug out of a big hole. And the residents and the consumers in town have had to pay a lot higher rates because of it. So we're making progress with the sewer fund. You'll see that it's going down 50 cents per 1,000 gallons, which is pretty substantial. The meter charges are changing to sewer accessibility fees, but in general, I don't want to say what a community our size, and Rich could touch on this, but a community our size, we should be at $9 to $10 per 1,000 gallons. I think that's more where we should be at if we have this model of sewer accessibility fees. So as we get a better grasp and we continue to plan, I think that we'll see hopefully our rates continue to go down for the treatment costs.
Correct. Like I mentioned, city council, city administration, nobody wants to see the rates as high as they are, but when we just have to track from things that were happening in the past, and then also plan for the future at the same time, it just doubles those costs or exponentiates those costs more than we need to. So.
And ours are double.
Yep,
What
correct.
it should be.
Yeah. So if we go to the next slide, we can show what the changes are from the rates as Jasper had mentioned, alluded to. I'm going to touch base on the left-hand side, and then I'll take Jasper to do the rate changes. So we're going to have a positive cash flow, which again I think is huge for this year because we've never had that since I've been here and since 2016. And as far as I'm aware, you haven't had that probably since like 2008. So based on those charges for service, or the charges for service, the bond payment that you've had $1 million for since 2010. So positive operating income for 2019 again is huge. Most of the rate increases has to do with capital improvements now, but also to do with the bond payments in the past, and then also in the future. This sewer fund does incorporate MRF into it, so that makes some changes in expenses and revenues a lot higher than they maybe would be if we did not include MRF activity. That's based on direction of staff and council, which is not set in stone as of today, but that's been the direction given, so that's what our budgets are based off of. I'll hand it over to Mr. Google.
So MRPUC, for anybody wondering what that acronym is, it's Minnesota River Valley Public Utilities Commission. And what we've done is we've basically taken what the 2018 adopted budget for MRPUC is, we've incorporated it into our sewer budget. If, let's say, MRPUC, we don't dissolve, and MRPUC passes a budget, our budget will look heavy, but our revenues will decrease and our expenses will decrease proportionally. So at the end of 2019, when we look at this, if MRPUC does get dissolved, we're prepared for it. If it doesn't, the books will reflect it because we won't have as much revenue and we won't have as much expense, and that'll be on MRPUC. I believe MRPUC is looking at adopting a budget on December 20th. So they potentially might do the same thing. Well, they'll adopt a budget, but their future is unknown. So that has been included in that, but basically it's a 1-for-1 match where the MRPUC budget has been incorporated into ours. If it doesn't happen, it doesn't really matter, but we're prepared if it does.
Let's be clear. What this simply means in layman's terms, if there's no MRPUC, then it becomes a city of the sewer facility, and this budget reflects that. Is that correct?
Correct, yes. Yeah, and I can talk about the rates. Again, it's based on proportional use and demand on the sewer collection system. So you'll see a substantial increase as you go down the meter sizes. And again, your sewer rates are based on your water usage. So, and it's based on your water meter size. So we don't have a sewer meter. It's all based on what your water usage is. So you'll see the increases are pretty substantial. And again, we've reached out to industrial commercial users that fall into those groups that would be affected. And really, because of the decrease in the per 1,000 gallons pump, or per 1,000 gallon charge, our larger users, and we don't have any 6-inch meter users in the community, but we do offer it. But the 2, 3, and 4-inch meters, they could potentially see roughly basically a neutral impact from this, just because of the sheer quantity of gallons of water that they use. The real impact will be the 1-inch and 1.5-inch, because those are the ones that are substantially increased based on what they previously were. And what we'll likely see, and we'll use our discretion at the staff level, is, let's say a resident or home that was built in the last 10 years. At some point in time, you'd be looking at a 1-inch meter versus, or a 5/8 inch versus a 1-inch meter. Well, in the past, there's maybe a couple dollar difference between the two, so you say, well, I want a 1-inch meter. Well, now that really has a large effect on your bill. Part of what's in the capital plan is a meter swap out program, and at that time they'll have the ability to say, well, I don't need a 1-inch meter, I just have a single family home, a 5/8 will be just fine. And we'll use our discretion at that time to say, well, you probably should have a 5/8 inch meter, you have a 1-inch, you're not really using, your system limits you to what you can actually use. When you do the meter swap out, you'll put in the right meter. So, but the 1-inch and 1.5-inch commercial users, they're the ones that are going to be impacted the most. And also your second meters that you have, there are some out there that people have 1-inch, 1.5-inch, even 2-inch irrigation meters. They're going to be affected as well. And we're going to try to make sure that they understand why, and because they put basically a demand on our system. So if approved tonight, we're going to have an extensive effort to try and get people to come in and say, well, how does this affect your bill? Because really people won't see these effects until they receive their bill, I believe at the end of January. So they won't see the actual implementation of this until January. So between basically now and when they get their bill, we want to make sure that if people have questions, we can bring them in, we can show them, compare their bills, see what their average usage is, things like that, just to make sure that they're not surprised. Now, at the staff level, whenever we make changes like this, the administrative staff in the front of City Hall really get hammered with questions, so making sure that they're up to speed on what's happening too is very important. So, same thing with water, we're trying to make it more equitable based on the demand on the system.
Councilmember Families.
To be clear, Jasper, the vast majority of the homes in our town will actually see a decrease.
Yes, definitely. So the majority, so there are roughly 1,400 residential meters, that's that 5/8 inch. They'll see roughly a 3.9% decrease in their sewer bill. So, and that's assuming an average use of water, which we've looked at and we've run the numbers, and the average 5/8 inch meter is using 3,700 gallons per month. That means some people are going to have less than that, some people are going to have more. If you have more, you're actually going to see a larger decrease, because the decrease is actually in the usage. So if you have a 5-inch meter or 5/8 inch meter and you're using 10,000 gallons a month, your decrease will be more than the 4%. So, but yeah, for the vast majority of people, you'll see a decrease.
Okay.
On the next one?
Before we go on, I go ahead and entertain a motion for a 5-minute recess.
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We're on 5-minute recess.
We want to keep you here as long as we can.
Don't worry, I'll charge you my hourly rate.
Yeah.
See you next year, Bill.
I think I'm gonna escape to the football game.
Yeah. This is normal here, so
What's that?
this is normal here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A second. All in favor?
Aye.
Mr. Dowd, the floor is yours.
Excellent. So let's resume, and we'll go to the electric fund next. So again, same thing we're looking at is looking at those two line items again, figuring out where our change in that position is going to be. This year, changing that position is going to be $718,000. That'll be used for future projects, future uses as well. Maybe not projects, but whatever we need it for. And then capital outlay is $605,000, $115,000 increase from last year, just based on needs again, deferred maintenance items that have not been touched need to be touched now. Depreciation is in there as well at $375,000. Again, that's something that we don't cut a check for. If anybody knows what depreciation is, that is our planning to replace the assets we already own in the future. Basically, the amount of money that we need in order to replace the assets with the same cost. Now, we all know that the same cost is probably not the same thing because of CPI increasing every year, but that's how much it would cost us to replace the items if everything went the same useful life. Some go less, some go more. So we'll do the same thing again. We'll go over the summary and the rate changes on the next tab. Positive cash flow for 2019, positive operating income, and the increase is related to capital improvements now and in the future. I will have Jasper touch base on electric fund because the main changes in what our changes in rates are, a lot of them come in electric, and I'll have them explain.
Yes, thank you, Zach. One thing you'll see, and I've mentioned this in the past, is that our demand rates for summer months, we haven't been charging what we're being charged for our wholesale rates. So that's the biggest change in this whole thing is our large industrial customers. You'll see the June through September demand rates per kilowatt are increasing pretty substantially. And that $14.10 is actually what we get charged from MMPA for that line item. The idea is that this year we'll break even on it, and then next year we'll follow our policy for that large industrial service of a 10% overhead charge on that. That can always change with city council. I guess the way that I kind of preached it is we have a policy. It's 10%, basically a 10% markup for industrial services. For a general commercial, it's 110% based on the MMPA fees. For the residential, it's 100, and for the rural service, it's 125, 125% markup on the kilowatt hour charges. And the way that I've said it and the way I've framed it is that city council really controls the franchise fee. You can determine what that is, and then the base fee, the rate for each meter. So looking at that, that's why we see a substantial increase in revenue, is because we're basically making up, breaking even for our summer demand charges this year, which is a substantial charge for our customers. One thing that we're working with them on is we have a pretty extensive what's called a CIP program through electric that allows some of our larger customers to apply for rebates that can reduce their demand charges in the summer. So they have a little bit of control of that charge. They can change operations internally. So that increase, if it increases enough, they'll change their habits, and we might not see as much revenue increase on that. But what we're planning on is just business as usual, because some of those businesses probably operate 24/7. So with that, you'll see there's for the residential, and that's our largest customer base. You'll see an increase for the base fee of 50 cents per month, but you'll see a per kilowatt hour charge decrease slightly. And the franchise fee is going up from 39 0.10% to 4 thousandths of a cent. So there's a slight increase. That's roughly about a 3% increase in the franchise fee. So there's some substantial changes. What we've established is a policy internally to help guide us in setting our electric rates, which will be very helpful. Our Councilmember Krogman and myself have been vocal at MMPA to try and get those rates for the next year as soon as we can, so that we can adjust them accordingly. I believe that's what happened in the past is we received them too late, we've already set our rates, and then now we've kind of, weren't able to keep up with their rate increases. So, with that, you know, these are the proposed changes for the electric rates. They fall in line with what we've done in the past. They're a little bit more rounder numbers. In some cases, as with the per kilowatt hour charge for residential, they went down slightly. Some go up a little bit, but in general, you know, I think establishing a policy and having set percentages for overhead is very helpful for staff, and it's easier for us to explain that to the public as well.
And to be clear, in addition to both water and wastewater, electric is also something that has been brought up to our industrial users, and they're aware that they're looking at a rate increase, and they've been invited to come and talk with city staff to go ahead and make sure they understand what they need to do moving forward.
Yes, yeah. As you can imagine, the top 10 users for water, wastewater, there are a lot of repeat customers for electric too. So it's all kind of the usual suspects, and we want to make sure that we're accessible to them. And you know, Acreage is one of our largest users, and we want to make sure that they understand why things are happening. You know, the simplest terms is that we want to be able to provide them this service uninterrupted, and there's some things that we need to invest in order to do that.
Any questions? Sorry. Otherwise, we move on to stormwater. Stormwater Fund, a slight increase is expected for next year. We'll talk about the rate increases in a second, but overall, it should be about a $20,000 increase in the revenue side of things. The reason why the Stormwater Fund was even started and budgeted for in 2018 and moving into 2019 is for the 2020-2021 project down here with the turn-back project from the county. So we will have to have a portion of that when we're funding for stormwater. So instead of having it as a levy impact on every resident, let's save some money right now, and we'll be able to get a fund balance started, and we'll be able to have some money set aside so we can pay for those debt service or that bond when that project comes around, instead of having everyone pay for it on the levy side. So that was started in 2018. Again, forward thinking by the council is to put some money away for projects. This is one of those funds that doesn't have any current basically draws on it right now, but it will have a draw on it in 2020, 2021 when that project starts from the county. Yes.
Yeah, if I may, this is one thing, we do have stormwater needs within the community, let's not get that mistaken, but what we've done and what the direction that I feel I've received from council is we want to really bank this money for that large expenditure for the Turnback project. If there are some things that come up for stormwater in 2019, 2020 that are kind of, I would say, urgent matters, you might see us come back and request to use some of these funds for those things.
1 second. I provided another packet for you. There's another handle that I set right in front of you guys that has the stormwater fund in there and the refuse fund as well, and we'll talk about in a second. So sorry, I should have made that known all the way.
Yeah. So right now we don't have any just general expenditures for this. You'll see basically everything that all of our revenues are allocated for capital outlay. So what that means is that we're just banking that money right now for future expense. But I just want to make sure that if there is an emergency situation where we need to expend water or dollars for stormwater, that request would come through city council if we wanted to do that.
Yes, sorry, I should have made that known. That it could be any project, but what it was identified for was the Turnback. But any project that needed for stormwater could use those funds for any purpose. So if we go to the next slide, it's projected to have a balanced budget because we're basically taking the money that we get from that and booking that for future things that may be needed in an emergency and or that Turnback project. Increases in rates is based on those capital improvement needs that we need now and in the future. So I'll have Jasper touch base on the rate changes per parcel acreage.
Yes, as Zach alluded to, this was a new utility in 2018. Personnel budget kind of came up with what the rollout plan is. Essentially, you're looking at the base rate, which is what city council adopts, and you'll see that in the actual utility fees. And I believe the base fee in 2018 was $7. In 2018 it was $7. In 2018 will go to $8. And the idea is that it will go up $1.50 from 2019 to 2020, and then eventually we'll get up to around $10 for the base fee. And then from there, it'll be based on need for stormwater. So you'll see that there's basically 75 cents a month, or 75 cents per month for most of the residential properties. You get up to some of our larger properties that are over 3 acres in size, you'll see a $2.50 increase per month. And that's just proportional based on the formula for how that's calculated. Any questions on stormwater?
Stormwater, yeah.
Okay.
Refuse. So a refuse fund is having a contract with Waste Management go around the city and pick up everyone's trash. So we monitor that, and they're able to keep down the amount of traffic on our streets by having only one provider of trash service within the city of refuse and recycling. So there is an increase from next year to this year based on, and I'll talk about that in a second from the rate changes, but the increase we're talking about is about a $20,000 increase in revenues, and about very proportional that on the expense side as well, because the rate changes that we have from last year to this year, or 2018 to 2019, are all because Waste Management gave us increases. So the main thing is that we have a positive cash flow again, using those for future needs if we have any of those. Basically what that fund does is we spend administration time on that fund in order to administer it, whether that's the receptionist up front or myself in the back, having to pay sales tax on those things. And when we do that, we have to spend time for ourselves, so we put money into the general fund in order to fund our operations from that refuse fund itself. So because we have that, we have an admin fee that we charge, which there's no increase for it. That's a top portion of that refuse admin fee on top there. So there's no increase for 2018 and 2019 because we felt like the city is making enough money based on those operations and how much we're spending time on those things. There is an increase for rates, and the reason why is because the provider is charging more to the city. So we had the issue with MMPA, with Waste Management. They did not give us an increase for 2018 until after we had approved 2018 rates already. So the city of Sueur actually supplemented refuse and recycling rates for residents for the year of 2018. I was able to get in contact with Waste Management much earlier this year, and they were able to provide me numbers that they're going to use for 2019. So you'll see those reflected in the refuse costs. That is a 1-to-1 ratio, whatever those refuse costs are, that is how much we are getting charged from Waste Management to provide that service to our residents. So we are not making any money on any of the refuse costs or the recycling costs. Those are 1-to-1 costs. But we are making money on it slightly as the admin fee, and that's based on our time that we spend.
If I may, if you were a member of the personnel and budget, you'll see that these numbers, like for the refuse costs, slightly changed.
Yes.
And that's because what we did, and you'll maybe remember this, is that I just did a 6% blanket increase because at that time we hadn't gotten the numbers from Waste Management. These are the actual numbers that Zach has gotten from Waste Management. So what we're doing is we're doing a 1-to-1 pass-through for those refuse costs. They let us know. And basically it's built into their contract that every, I think, November, they need to let us know what it is for their increase, and their increase has to be based on the CPI Midwest. So we can kind of estimate what that is, but they need to formally tell us what these numbers are, and they'll likely increase next year too. This contract goes through 2020, so that's something to keep in mind. At that time, we can either choose to renew, we can choose to go out for proposals again, or we can choose to open it up to just general service within the community. Get out of the refuse business as a city. So in 2020 we'll have that conversation, or before that obviously. But just know that the refuse costs that we have here are actually what Waste Management charges the city. There's no administrative markup on that. Same with the recycling costs. The only thing that we receive revenue, and it's roughly $12,000 a year, is for the admin fees that you'll see on your bill.
Correct.
Is it possible to refuse the refuse increase from Waste Management?
We would have to we would have to dispute the contract, but
Mr. Johnson, we may recycle you, so be careful.
Could you go back to that slide for the stormwater? What was the net position for stormwater?
0, because we were just, the change in that position for stormwater was, we were gonna take it and use it for capital purchases, so the entire amount of the increase, or any dollars amount that we're not moving over for administration.
Yeah, we just tried to write that down because it just says value on our handout for stormwater. So I think
Wonder why it
probably
didn't,
a cell error or something.
Must have been an Excel error or something why it didn't move, but I took this off the same spot, so it shouldn't have had any problems, but okay. Yeah, 0, sorry.
While we're focusing on stormwater, could you go back to the fee chart, the next artist? Does that reflect the mid-course correction we made after originally adopting this?
Yeah, it does. So, I don't know, I think in March there was an ordinance amendment to this. So we changed it up, we reduced the last tier was greater than 10 acres. We brought that down to greater than 3, and we changed up the max acreage on there. So if you have a 20-acre parcel, your fee was basically cut in half, which, I think it was a good conversation to have. And in new ordinances like that, it's trial and error, and we get feedback from the public, and, I think the process worked. So, yes, this is reflective of what's in the actual current ordinance.
So if we skip past the refuse and talk about the changes, I wanted to give a breakdown to show what the actual difference is going to be from 2018 to 2019, because that's what everyone wants to know, is how it's going to affect my bill. So if we took the average residential home, which is 450 kilowatt hours used, this is residential, not anything to do with commercial or industrial usage, it's just residential. 3,700 gallons used, which is the average amount of gallons used, and a 96-gallon refuse receptacle. That charge would be $181.76 in 2018. That same exact usage and gallon receptacle and 1 kilowatt hours of electric would be $187.95, so an increase of $6.19. Again, there's some decreases for sewer, small increases for water, some increases for the refuse and stormwater and stuff like that. The average household valued at $165 will see no change in value. If they saw no change in value, we'll see a decrease of $125, which I talked about at the TNT meeting, that your decrease will be $125. So overall, if you had to base it off of how much your increase will be per month, including taxes and utility rates, you're at $4.94. Jeff put together this nice little chart that showed how much the change is going to be. So you went from 2470 to 2603, the $1.33 change in refuse. Again, has to 100% do with what we're being charged as a city. Water, 3,700 gallons, and sanitary sewer, 3,700 gallons. Those net out to be about $4 total change, which is approximately what your increase will be. Electric, 11-cent change, very, very minimal, and 75-cent change in stormwater, totaling $6.19.
Councilmember Sullivan?
I just want to ask Jasper, after tonight, can you get us that slide and send that out to us?
Yeah, that's what I was gonna mention, is that if approved, if the utility rates are approved tonight, we're gonna really plaster social media and make sure people understand this. If you look back to from 2017 to 2018, I think the utility increases were just over $16 on average per residential customer, so that's pretty substantial. And that was including the levy increase as well. This is under $5, so it's not on the same level, but it's an increase, and people, what I want and what I kind of envision is, if somebody's interested, I'd love to be able to have kind of a little widget on our website, if anybody out there knows how to do that or wants to do that, where you can plug in all your information on yourself, your meter size, your trash receptacle, how many gallons of water you use, all the information here. Plug it in and you can see it, but we don't have that technology. So what I envision is somebody coming in and plugging their numbers into basically an Excel sheet and kind of going through them, what their changes are. So, for sanitary sewer, if you use 5,000 gallons, you're going to see a larger decrease in your rate than that $2.85. You'll see a larger increase in your water, so it'll be roughly proportional, but it's good to make sure people understand that. And same with the businesses or commercial businesses, we want to make sure we're accessible to them so they can come in and ask the question and basically try to figure out what their bill will be in 2019 with these changes.
In the short run, I'd recommend putting that on the January utility bill, that chart, that's very relevant for the average residential user, which is most of our users. That would be a nice bird's eye view of the increases, and I also communicate that it's based on their usage.
Yes, no, I think that's a good idea. I think we'll have the newsletter will go out in December, and we'll put some things on there.
And I think even taking that one step further, that whole entire slide, even the top part,
Yep.
would be attractive to
Yeah.
the consumer.
Any questions overall on the utility funds?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Roloff.
I totally understand why we have to increase some of these fees by a small extra margin, but I will be voting no on it.
We need to have a reason as to why you're gonna be voting no and what particular line item you're willing to go ahead and sacrifice. Fair enough?
Yep.
Okay.
So I'll be voting no on the increases in the budget on the water, the sewer, and the electric. We currently have homeowners in this town that are having a very hard time paying their city bill. And when they can't pay it, it gets sent to their property taxes. I have had numerous homeowners contact me saying that they understand why we have to increase it, but it continues to happen year after year after year after year. And I will be voting no to protect the homeowners.
And that was no on the water, the sewer, and the electric, and what else did you
Yep.
say, Councilmember Roloff?
And the sanitary.
Sanitary. Or the stormwater you're talking about?
Yep, stormwater, yep.
Yep. Okay, anybody else have anything? Okay. So in regards to our utilities increase, let's get to my right page here. We are looking, first off, we're gonna have to go ahead and, we'll open up public comment, to talk about utility rate and the budget adoption. Can I get a motion to go ahead and open up public comment?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Motion is carried. Public comment is now open. Does anybody wish to address city council regarding utility rate and budget adoption?
Mr. Mayor, so I made a mistake, I meant to say yes.
Okay.
Aye.
Okay. I got you. Make the record reflect 7-0 on that, please. And, like I said, anybody wish to address, city council regarding utility rate and budget adoption? This is your opportunity now to go ahead and have the floor. City administrator.
If I may, we're not required to have public comment, but we thought it would be good to offer it up if anybody, had any interest in it. So it's not like the TNT hearing where we have a public hearing on it, but we wanna make sure that if somebody's got some input, we wanna hear it.
Okay, seeing no participation, I'll go ahead and entertain a motion to close the public comment.
So moved.
Utility rate and budget adoption.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Just to be clear, before we go ahead and take this vote, could you just, in a very short summation, kind of give the residents and the business owners and industrial users in Sueur kind of an idea in regards to what they're looking at and what the city of Sueur is prepared to do to go ahead and help them when it comes to understanding what these rate increases are gonna be, how we got to where we are, and what we're trying to do to remedy the problem moving forward?
Yeah, so in general, I would say the theme of this is planning for the future. A lot of these things, you'll see this in the general fund as well, is we're investing in capital expenditures. That's one aspect. You'll see in our 2017 audit and even our 2018 prelim numbers for water, we're not really making enough money to fund the operations and the future infrastructure improvements. So that's the one thing with the water. Electric, the major theme is that we want to just adopt a policy and have, not lose money on certain aspects of our wholesale rates. Sewer, we're switching up, sewer and water, we're switching up the meter charges to be more equitable, and really have the sewer, the access fees tied to the demand that the user's putting on the system. Stormwater, we're staying the course of trying to develop a fund to pay for future stormwater improvements. In refuse, it's, just being more fiscally responsible with, being transparent with the residents of what Waste Management is charging us, and, how that's passed on to them, as a customer. In general, it's really planning, that's what we're here for as staff, is to plan for the future and try to figure out a path forward that's most, fiscally responsible. We could keep rates low, for an extended period of time and then have a project and then have them go up, substantially like what we've done or what has happened in stormwater. One thing, that I've done in the past is look at what our historic rates have been over time and how they've increased. We went through a period of time of 7-8 years during that recession period, where there were no increases in any of the rates except for sanitary sewer. So, that model, if you incorporate what the consumer price index is and what those increases are, it's not sustainable over time, and we're just gonna keep, digging ourselves into a hole. Because we have an obligation to the public to provide service for water, sewer, electric, that's, uninterruptible and consistent and reliable. So we have to do that, that's our duty, and we have to make sure we're doing it fiscally responsible. So that's what I hope this model brings, what this council can do, is ultimately, we're increasing rates right now, but long term, it'll save the city and the citizens, money if we're being responsible with our maintenance and with our replacement policies.
And would it be safe to say that barring another recession, that there's gonna be light at the end of the tunnel on this?
I hope so. I mean, really, all of our rates are very competitive at the median value or under that, except for sanitary sewer. I feel like, just the general morale of the citizenry here is affected by the sanitary sewer rates because they're so high and they skew what your utility bill looks like. I'm hoping that, over the next, it's gonna take some time yet, 5 to 10 years, that we're gonna get back to where we should be. Barring outside forces like MPCA saying there's additional regulations and things like that we can't really plan for, but we hope that, we can get some outside funding for that stuff too.
And a lot of that was attributed to the bond payments for the sewer that we fell behind on.
And technically we never fell behind, we just came really close to not being able to make the payment. So we had to get creative financially to do that. But yeah, moving forward, I think we have a good plan, and our sewer fund is going in the right direction. We're proposed to be in the black for 2019, which is, like Zach said, the first time that's happened since probably 2008.
Any questions from anybody? I'll entertain a motion to approve the utility rates, corresponding budgets, and resolutions.
So moved.
Is there a second? Any additional discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Nay.
Let the record reflect 6-1. Okay, capital improvement plan.
All right, I'll move on to the capital improvement plan, capital equipment plan. So I won't go into the detail line by line, but you'll see in the packet, there is a capital improvement plan. This hasn't changed from the 26th, I believe, but this does go over 5 years. The first year, the 2019 year, is funded in the budgets that have been passed this year. Items still need to go through formal approval through city council. That means either through the disbursements, or if it's a larger project, we'll follow the purchasing policy. If it's a piece of equipment and it's not on the state bid, we'll go through the process of collecting bids or quotes. And we'll use our purchasing policy for that. So again, every item that's in this list is budgeted for and included in the budgets that have been passed. The enterprise funds have a separate location, so in the general levy, you'll see the capital improvement projects. That's different. Each of the enterprise funds for just reporting has their own fund for that, but we handle it the same way, where let's say we allocate $500,000. In 2018, we only use $400,000. That $100,000 transfers over to the next year. And vice versa, if we have a major project 5 years down the road, we can start allocating and planning for that ahead of time and start generating those funds. So we haven't done that yet, per se, because we're just getting started with this, but if we know and we adopt a pavement management plan where we have a set schedule where we know what street projects we're gonna be doing, we can start allocating for those street projects well in advance to try to supplement any bond payments that we have. And you know, once we get caught up on capital equipment, which you'll see we have a lot of capital equipment replacements in 2019, and some of those you guys have seen already with some of the pre-approvals to lock in some cheaper prices. So, but you'll see a lot of items. One of the biggest components that we're looking at is leasing versus buying for this. So buying, what we would end up doing, and lease in the sense of a municipal lease is totally different than I guess a residential lease or a private lease that you'll do with a car. Basically, leasing allows us to finance items similar to what we would do as if we would have an equipment certificate, which is a bond that we would sell, and just basically get a lump sum of cash and buy all the equipment outright. Now, there's a couple disadvantages to that. One thing is we want to try to keep that interest rate between the lease and the bond as close as we can, and right now, I think if this goes through, we'll be at probably about 0.75% more than an equipment certificate, but there are items in there that, you know, free up bonding capacity if we need it. We have some major projects. We have some flexibility with if we run into a problem or a recession, we aren't obligated. We can get out of a lease through certain means if we really need to. So we have a lot more flexibility with the lease. I'd like it for our financial situation that we're in right now. In an ideal place, you know, maybe 10 years down the road, we'll be in a place where we could have planned for future capital expenditures and paid cash for them. We're not paying any interest, but we're just not there, and we have an aging fleet that, you know, we've invested as a city in our personnel, and we want to make sure they have the equipment that they need to do a really good job and provide the best service to the citizens. So, in a nutshell, that's where the capital improvement plan is. There's a lot of items in there. One thing I want to just kind of summarize where those allocations are. The biggest one you can see is streets and parks, and that's one because of the TAP sidewalk project, which is 31 blocks of sidewalks that we receive federal grant dollars for. So some of those dollars, that includes the grant disbursement. So, you know, it's $531,000. So you could knock that off the top of that 1.278. But in order for us to look at the project as a whole, that's the way we include it in the capital improvement plan. So that's the biggest one. We have $400,000 that are allocated towards street maintenance. Now we're going to likely use the pavement management plan as a guide for that. So looking at some of our areas of concern, we're going to do some curb replacement, some kind of patching work. A lot of places that you'll see, and I look at council member Faveli's, you'll see some undermining or some bad pavement along the curb line that really gets tore up when we plow the streets. You know, those things, that's just looking for trouble, because once you get water underneath your pavement, then that's when bad things happen. So we're going to really be able to address a lot of those areas. And again, we'll follow our purchasing policy for that, those expenditures. I see multiple vendors doing multiple different aspects of that job, or, you know, specialized areas of that kind of maintenance. But we'll keep city council updated on what we're actually going to use those dollars for once we develop a more concrete plan. Yeah, are there any questions about what we have in the capital improvement plan?
Councilmember Families.
Yeah, just a question, where are we at on the sidewalks?
I think we have 7 easements left, so we're getting really close. And if I think they have 2 weeks, roughly 2 weeks left to respond, and if they don't, then we hand them over to Mr. Coriel, and he takes care of it for us. You know, and we either you know, have to pay something for it, or we just get them to sign off on the easements. But we're really close. I mean, I think I can't remember how the total is, over 100 total, so we're down to the home stretch. So it's the project will happen next year. We'll get that done.
Good.
Yep.
Thank you.
So, again, you know, if there's anybody that wants to comment on this from the public, you know, the idea is that we could have a public comment on this. And then what we would look for is just a motion approving the 2019 through 23 CIP CEP for the city of Sueur. But yeah, I can entertain any questions if there are any.
Just, could you go back to the previous slide with the totals? On the administration, can you just highlight, and I really realize that's on the list, the ones that you consider comp plan related, the ones that are improvements that are related to the comp plan?
Yeah, definitely. Once I get there, I know so off the top of my head, the wayfinding signage is something that's been identified in there.
Transportation and utility plan.
Yeah, the transportation and utility plan,
Comprehensive plan contingency.
the comprehensive plan contingency as I dig through my,
Also a facade program.
yeah, the facade program, that's all identified. Okay, here we go.
145, about half of that.
Yeah.
145K.
So yeah, the transportation utility comp plan contingency, wayfinding signage, facade program, you know, those are the core ones that are tied to the comprehensive plan.
Can you clarify the transportation utility, that's what are the specifics of that?
Yeah, so in our comprehensive plan, and the idea is that we have a transportation and utility plan that acts as a kind of an appendice to our comp plan. And what it does is it looks at our whole city and it tells us, you know, what our streets are classified, so going through the standard classification system that they have, what future roads should be in our priority growth area, and then what kind of utilities we need to plan for when we put these future roads in. So this stemmed from, one, we have a comprehensive plan. It's a nice comprehensive plan, but when we really start looking at it, and we really started looking at it with this the INH proposal to build apartments down in the south end of town, we couldn't use our comprehensive plan to guide us as far as, well, what kind of traffic should we expect on 4th Street? What kind of road should be tied in between Ridge Road and I forget the other name. 4th Street, yeah, Ridge Road and 4th. You know, what kind of road, should there be a road? You know, in town we have a lot of dead ends. I believe Central Avenue, kind of by Kingsway, dead ends into the Sunderman, Kingfield. You know, we don't have any plan on paper saying, well, what should that road do in the future? So it's looking at just future growth within the city. What are we doing with all of our dead end roads and what should they be, you know, as far as completed? And then what kind of utilities should we have underneath those roads when we build them? And are the utilities that we currently have underneath our roads sufficient to support the type of zoning that's in our area? So it's a more comprehensive look of what we have going on in the city. I just think of the whole process at the Planning Commission and with INH and with city staff. There wasn't any guidance there, and typically a comprehensive plan provides that kind of guidance.
Okay, thank you.
So yeah, it'll be a good tool, especially if we have future developments.
And the CIP, CEP, 1.2 million of that is actually enterprise fund dollars, and the other 1.9 million is general fund dollars. And I'm sure everybody here understands that, but for the benefit of those out there in the audience.
Yep. And some of the sources, we have some carryover from last year, or from this year. And then we have some federal grant dollars that are going towards that general fund allocation. So, and you know, once these things are conceived as an idea from the staff level, if there are grant opportunities, we're looking at it. And some of these items have grants tied to them already, but there's no guarantees in getting grants. If we get a grant, then, you know, then that dollar allocation goes down.
If I can be clear, as we move to a motion, the memo talks only about capital improvement plan, but we're really talking about capital improvement plan and capital equipment plan, correct?
Yes.
When we make a motion, it'll be very clear.
Correct, yep. Yeah, if, you know, the suggested motion is on the screen, and it includes the equipment portion.
Entertain a motion and open up public comment for the CIP capital improvement plan and capital equipment plan adoption.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Public comment is now open for CIP, CEP. Does anybody from the audience wish to address City Council? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to go ahead and close the public comment for CIP, CEP adoption.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I'll now entertain a motion to approve the 2019 to 2023 capital improvement plan, capital equipment plan for the city of Sueur.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion is carried.
We have to stand up against
Governmental fee schedule and building department fee schedule adoption.
All right, Mayor Haig, members of the city council, before you, in your packet, you'll see, and I'll kind of walk through it, the governmental fee schedule and the building department fee schedule. So what we've done this year, and we kind of did this mid-year, in 2018 when we hired our building official, and he had the opportunity to go through and formally develop a fee schedule. We adopted that fee schedule in lieu of the one that was in the governmental fee schedule. What we're doing in 19 is we're continuing that trend, and we're separating them. They are linked together, but for the sake of having something that we can hand to a prospective builder in town, having the building department fee schedule separate I think is useful. So what you'll see, and we'll kind of go through this, the fee schedule, there aren't many changes. We've updated some things to reflect some minor changes. The biggest thing that I want to talk about, and I think we'll probably spend the most time on, is the community center rates. And we talked about this at personnel and budget, and we talked about this at the 26th meeting. One of the biggest feedback that I received is that we want to have a community center that's inclusive. One item that I had on there was requiring that it's automatically withdrawn from bank accounts. We pulled that out. And we can continue on with receiving checks, cash, however any individuals can make payments to them. So adding that might be more inclusive. Basically what we're doing is we're creating an a la carte system where people can choose what they want to do. One thing that keep in mind is that we currently pay sales tax on any memberships that we have, and we haven't been charging that to the patrons, which is fine, but we want to make sure that that's clear. What the basic increases are for family and adult is 8% across the board, roughly. So there's a slight increase there that covers the sales tax and what I consider a little bit for capital improvements. You can see the capital improvement plan that was just adopted. There's some substantial things going on at the community center. One of the biggest one is being equipment replacement there. So I think that a slight increase for that enhancement to the facility is warranted. If we don't increase rates and we don't have our rates cover those costs, then they just are passed along to our general levy allocation. So the idea with also having this a la carte system where people can choose what tier they want and what if they're a family, adult, or senior, is that we're getting rid of the non-resident charges on this. So what that means is that, and the reason and the rationale behind this is because we have businesses in town with a lot of employees. Those businesses pay a lot in taxes. And likely you're not going to get somebody from, let's say, St. Peter or a surrounding town to come to our facility. You're going to get the out-of-town people that you're going to get are people that work in town. So the justification, and this is something we can have a talk about and discuss, is that we have employers in town that have a lot of employees, and we want to try to tap into that market and get them to use our facility. And the justification for not having separate rates is that our businesses in town pay property taxes just like the residents in town. We're hoping that will drive a membership increase for non-resident, people that work in town. Now, there won't be a distinction between somebody who lives in the country versus somebody who works in town. It's all the same rate. But in general, that's the recommendation moving forward. The second thing is that, so the general increase for family is 8%, the general increase for adult memberships is 8%, and the general increase for senior is 6%. And what you'll see, one of the things I'm kind of curious to see what the market will drive is the tier 5 items where you have access just to the outdoor and indoor pool. So I think this would be attractive to families in the summer who want to have access for the facilities to the pool for their kids. So you could, a family with 3 kids or 2 kids could have their kids have full access to the outdoor pool. Granted, there's swimming lessons and some other things that go on there that are scheduled, but any open swim period, they would have access to that, for a month for $45 a month. Now, looking at those price points, you could look at it and, you'd obviously have to make that decision as a family. But, I think the major theme of the changes are you have options. You have a lot more options here. You have more flexibility. I think just because you're a full membership or you don't have a membership, I think we'll tap into a market and make it more accessible to people that maybe couldn't afford a full access membership, which is what we only offer right now. So I think we'll see an increase in membership with this change. One thing you'll see, we're getting rid of the senior student rates for the day passes. We still are offering the 10-day punch cards, where basically you get the 10th day free. The Merrick Room, gym, and pool, they all received slight hourly increases. Ice time, you'll see that went up to $180 per hour, which is more competitive. It's actually lower than some of our competitors around the area. Now, just internally, we're going to use discretion there because the people that are renting the ice right now, they're in the middle of their season. That ice rate time won't go into effect until next fall, next winter, that next season. So we'll keep that $147 just because that's what those groups have budgeted for. It would be a challenge for those groups to come up with those funds in short notice. One thing too, and I was going to mention this when Councilmember Favalis was talking about personal training. That's something that internally we have 2 instructors that have, one has worked with the city for quite some time, another one we just hired. They're offering personal training through their own business. Right now, and starting in 2019, what we're going to do is we're going to funnel that through the community center. So there will be a community center personal trainer option, and right now that's set at $40 per hour. And then you have that same punch card option where you get, you buy 10, you buy 9, you get your 10th free. So we will have that option, which I think is good, and and from my just examination of the community center and what they've been doing, we have had one of those instructors that has been giving fitness tours, equipment kind of instruction already, and we've had some sort of deal worked out with them, and now we're kind of more formalizing it and having it be a personal trainer deal. So I think it's an added thing, and frankly, our rec coordinator is excited to be able to market something like this because she's excited, and I think also the personal trainers are excited because we're going to schedule it for them. We're going to tell them when they need to do it. We're going to kind of take away that admin burden, and they can kind of use the community center to market it. So, there's substantial changes here. I mean, this is a big change as far as the rate structure goes. I'm confident we can roll it out if this is passed by the beginning of the year. There will be, a time period where we have to contact members and they have to pick and choose what they're going to do. So there will be a time period. It won't be just automatically happen. So there will be a time period where we have to figure it out in the beginning of the year. But the beginning of the year is the time of year people are most interested in fitness. So a lot of people show up at the community center.
If I may, aren't people on a rolling basis when they join, their 1-year pass would apply or whatever it is?
They are. So in those cases where somebody bought an annual membership, their annual membership would go until, let's say they bought it in November of, let's say it expires in November of 2019, they would be able to lock in their rate and have access at the full access level until November of 19. At that time, they would have to renew if they chose, and they would have to pick.
And with the 16 different groupings, you know, for the family, the adult, and the senior, plus the day pass, how do we anticipate on policing this to make sure that people are using what they're supposed to be using? And also, how do we plan on knowing the difference between somebody that's on a month-to-month, quarterly, or an annual? I mean, we're talking about a lot of potential color variations here to identify those that are using the facility.
Yeah.
I know we're trying to work out the details right now, but, you know, maybe kind of give those that are in attendance kind of a preview in regards to how this is going to look.
Yeah, so we don't have the most, I guess, technologically advanced community center where we can have an access card. We're going to try to get there where we have an access card that we can program what you have access to. In the interim, the rec coordinator is looking at what other communities our size do for these types of things. And I mean, a lot of it is just you hope your patrons respect the facility and respect the fee schedule. You know, but sometimes that doesn't happen. What we're going to look at doing is, if you're a member, you'll get some sort of wristband, you know, maybe like a little rubber wristband or something that you can wear in the interim, and we'll see how that works. It'll be a process to evaluate if it's working or not. Right now, we have issues, and we run into issues with people just hanging out at the community center. You know, if they don't have a wristband on, that'll flag somebody on staff to say, well, you know, what are you doing back here? Are you a member? Well, maybe you forgot your wristband. Maybe you didn't. Maybe you're not supposed to be there. So it'll help us identify it because there'll be some visual cues. But overall, you know, I think we're going to see how this works out in 2019. In 2020, you might see some capital expenditures to enhance the door systems, things like that, if this is the route that we want to go. So, and that takes a lot of work, and it's an expensive endeavor. I mean, we're doing it in various parts of the city right now, and it's very costly. So we'll see how it works, but the idea is that there will be a wristband program.
Councilmember Sullivan.
One comment that I received actually late today was in regards to Tier 5, as you spoke about with the pool. There was a couple of comments came up about offering that on a quarterly basis as well, being able to pay that one shot for the summer specifically.
You could definitely pay, you know, $45 times 3 right away if you wanted. The idea is that we don't have a quarterly because we wanted to make sure that it wasn't competing with some of our other tiers. Because I could see, I guess the idea is that you could just, you know, do that one tier, and you know, it's not that much more to go up the next level. So,
and I see it. I mean, I see that as well. But the comments that are coming up are people that specifically only use the outdoor pool.
Yeah.
And they're looking at it going, okay, you're offering other community members a discount for paying one time for 3 months, guaranteeing 3-month purchase. But then you go in, we're solid users of the pool every year outdoors.
Yeah.
And we're not given any kind of a break for a 3-month upfront purchase.
If that's something that we would want to add, we could do that. And basically, from month to month to quarterly, I believe it's a 10% discount is what you can get. So we could add that in.
It's just a comment that came up today, so I just thought I'd address that.
Yeah, I don't see an issue with it. It's the annual. You know, and as people, the idea is that the price point between a Tier 5 and a Tier 1 per month is $10 a month, and we hope that people use the full access or do the full access membership, but we want to make sure that the options are out there. So, I mean, if that's something we want to do, we can easily add that in.
Could we simply make it, you said it'd be 10%, if we're 45 for 3 months, that's $4.50, just make it $40 for a quarter.
$40 a month for quarters, so it would be $120.
No, it's quarterly, it's month. 1 month is 15, so a quarterly would be 3 months would be 40.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, you're looking at the senior level.
Yeah, that's Tier 5, right?
Well, there's 3 Tier 5s.
Yes, 3 Tier 5.
How much at the senior?
There's seniors, there's adults, and there's family.
I have another question. Do we currently have gift certificates?
I don't know.
Because if you think about this, give certificates for use up at the facility, would be wonderful gifts, would be great inspirations for businesses to be able to have, you know, a 3-day pass or a 6-month trial or something like that. I could see even the service clubs having that as a prize in one of their raffles or something. Anything, you know, the truth is we're trying to drive people to a wonderful facility that we say is a gem in the community. We believe that. So it should be one of those things that, you know, what a great thing to be able to get.
No, I really like that idea. I'll look at it. If we don't, we'll offer it. We'll come up with something. I mean, it makes sense. We can do that internally. But yeah, I like that idea. I mean, even for events that, you know, the city hosts, you could do something like that where you have gift certificates, you know, wellness day stuff. Well, it's a little different, but yeah, I mean, it's a good idea.
It's all part of the membership drives. So, you know, it's one of those aspects that when you are talking to businesses, it's one of those things that you can present to them. You know.
Yeah, and just so everybody's clear, all these, you know, everything's still being worked out as far as all the logistics of all this with the Recreation Parks Advisory Council, as well as our Alicia that's up there now to kind of go through and get things going. So I'm sure that we're going to see lots of different things that are going to change or get added throughout 2019, but this is at least a starting point, so we have something to work with.
So our goal is to adopt this evening.
That's correct.
Okay. I'm concerned about the tier 5s, the 3 blanks for quarterly. I'm just as a part of discussion would propose for the first one, the family indoor outdoor,
Maybe that like
make
40.
it $40 for quarterly. For,
No, be
go ahead.
120, right?
What?
You're talking the family one?
Yeah, family. From
Family.
45 to
Tier
40.
5 family, the one that's blank right now.
Yeah, but it should be 40 times 3.
Yeah, 40
right?
times
So it'd be
3.
120
120, yeah.
For the quarterly?
for the quarterly.
120, okay.
Yeah.
Let's try it.
And then for the adult?
For the adult, it'd be like 49 times 3. It's $54, but you have times 3 then you have to discount it.
Maybe make it just a flat 50 for the adults for the quarterly.
That'd be 150 for quarterly then, right?
No, the adults is 18.
See, that's what I mean, you're confusing me.
Adult tier 5 is $18 a month.
Right.
So we multiply that times 3, that's 54. There's a 3 months.
It's either 50 or 49, one of the two.
48, you take $2 off each would be 48.
I don't care, I think we need to fill in the blank and move on.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we could, so what the formula is that I use is that it's a 10% reduction and then it rounds it to the nearest dollar. And we could, I would prefer to continue that theme because it's all kind of tied together and there's a rationale behind the discount. So I could either calculate those out for you or just get the direction to follow the quarterly rates for the tier 5s.
I prefer the latter.
Okay.
This is micromanaging at this point.
Yeah, I could just do that, and it'd be the same, it'd be a 10% reduction on what the amount would be from month to month.
Okay. And I have one other question then. I'm concerned about ice time. Do we have a contract with these folks right now? So they're like everybody else that at a certain point it's going to change, or should we make this ice time effective September 2019?
We don't have a contract. What we do is have an agreement, it's a handshake deal, where they schedule their ice time. We're talking Bulldog Youth Hockey and Bulldog Hockey. They schedule their ice time under the assumption that it's $147 per hour. If you wanted to clarify it, you could say, put a little asterisk by it and say it's effective September 2019.
I would suggest we do that for clarity, but Mr. Favely said something.
Councilmember Families?
Yeah, because the organizations are like we are. They set their budgets so that they know how much money they're going to be spending as far as the kids go and the ice goes and everything else.
Exactly.
I was concerned when I found out about the $180 because the day before I found out, I had been called by the new treasurer for Bulldog. And I had a discussion with him, and they said, well, as far as I know, we're not raising those prices until we've had, sat down and talked with Bulldog. And then I found out that this was gonna be on the budget for approval. The question with that one was, who sat down with Bulldog?
So what we've done internally is, Tom Gerlich is going to those meetings now, the monthly meetings. I've talked to, I believe, Darren. He's the president of Bulldog Youth Hockey.
Okay.
We've been playing phone tag, so we've attempted to talk to them. I don't know if Tom has had a conversation with them or not about this, but we will. And it won't go into effect, and it wasn't intended to go into effect until next year anyway, at the end of next year, but I think if we clarify it, it gives them the time to do it.
You're not clear there. You say the end of next year, that would be December. It'd be a full year at the old rate.
Yeah, we'll say September of 2019.
September 2019.
That's what I thought it was when we were talking before.
Yeah.
Prior to the 2019-2020 season.
Yeah, but just say September 2019, you got it. I want to move to another minor thing in here, if I may, on the fee schedule. Every now and then something jumps out at you. I asked Jasper earlier today what happened to the fences. They weren't in one place, they're now in another. This thing on the first page under planning and zoning on the bottom, fifth item down, fence less than 7 feet in height. What happens to one that's greater than 7? Is something wrong there?
No, they need a special permit, like they need to go through a building permit to do that. So this is just, so then you could refer to the building department fee schedule for that.
General schedule.
Because, yeah, so in our code, we allow fences 7 feet tall. If not, if they're bigger than 7 feet, then you need to go through engineering and that process. So that's why it's in here that way.
To be clear, you said we allow them 7 feet in height. Then you have to, this is not correct then. It has to be,
7 feet or
Each.
less.
yeah,
Less than or equal to 7 feet.
yeah.
Yeah, I'll make that change.
And where within the building department fee schedule does it indicate these fences that are?
It doesn't
7
anymore.
feet?
They took it, it was taken out, that's where I noticed it.
Yeah.
Now you go to the general calculation scale, there's a whole table that you go to.
Yeah, so it's based on valuation if it's a larger fence.
That's
So we have
right.
to have a special permit for anything over 7 feet,
Correct, yeah.
just because of the way our zoning is.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which, it's there for a reason. But yeah, I can make that change to less than or equal to 7 feet now.
Correct.
Yeah, I'll make that change.
Any other questions regarding our fee schedule adoption?
Yeah, I mean, the big thing is the recreation, change, the recreation fees change.
Well, I think to Councilmember Krogman's point, we might want to come up with a quarterly number for the tier fines before we continue.
Well, what I've done is I think the direction that I would recommend is that we just allow a quarterly tier 5 and just follow the formulas for everything else, the way they're calculated, and we'll go that route.
Is that acceptable too?
Yeah, and then I'll add the effective September 2019,
Bulldog up for the hockey.
Yeah, and I can just make those changes. You can choose to put that in your motion or not. You don't need to. They'll happen, but you guys can.
I'd say with the changes just noted.
Yeah.
I'll entertain a motion of the public comment on the government fee schedule and building department fee schedule.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion's carried. Anybody from the public that would like to go ahead and address City Council regarding our fee schedule adoption for 2019, this is your opportunity. Anybody? Go ahead and entertain a motion to go ahead and close the public comment for the fee schedule adoption.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion is carried. Entertain a motion to approve resolution adoption of the 2019 governmental fee schedule and the 2019 building department fee schedule with the notes that have been annotated regarding the quarterly for the tier 5s and to September 2019 for ice time.
So moved. And the fence.
And the seven, equal to or less than 7 foot for the fence.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion is carried.
Jasper, just to follow up one time on those numbers, can you send them out to us when you get them figured out?
Yep, that'll be.
Okay, we're gonna go ahead and skip right now because we're gonna have a portion of our meeting that's gonna be closed to the public. So prior to that, we're gonna do our comments, reports, and items of appreciation. So with that said, let me get out my little notebook here. And we'll start with Councilmember Huntington, please.
Oh, awesome.
I know you had an HRA meeting, so I'm
Yes.
dying to hear about that.
HRA meeting was last week. We're still discussing our director of HRA is working on a grant for capital improvement. We're trying to get for 2019 a $1.5 million project we've slided for 2019. So basically our meeting for that was that she's working on it. We're working on 2 different grants for that. One through DEED, I believe, and then one through some housing authority deal.
Is that that Southwest housing?
It sounds like that,
initiative or
yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah, that we're working on it, so. No new news on that. I know the grants are due this year, or the application is due. We won't know until next year if we get approved.
Yeah, I remember signing it. So, anything else to report, sir?
Other than thanking the public for the coming down to the parade. As I shared, living in this town for 20 years, it's one of my highlights of living in this town. And it's just, it is a great time, just as much as a giant celebration, I think. And it's always great, no matter how cold it is, people show up. And in our second year of tree lighting in Louis Park, always a blast. I think it is a great time to see the community get together. And I want to thank all the service groups and all the businesses that open up their doors to hot chocolate, hot dogs, and refreshments around. And thanking the city as well, staff for setting everything up for it. It was a great time. So.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Roloff.
I just have one thing, kind to actually relate to our holiday celebration that we had. I have heard from a few people that came all the way from Mankato, and it was their actually first time to our town, and they were very pleased and very happy with our celebration.
Perhaps it was your Santa Claus hat that got excited. Thank you, Councilmember Roloff. Councilmember Krogman.
Yes, I'm gonna just do one thing here. January the 30th, the Coalition of Greater Minnesota Cities will have what they call a Legislative Action Day. I will be attending as our representative, I believe. If anyone has something dealing with city government that they would like to bring to my attention, or the mayor's, for example, I would like to represent us in the best ways possible. One thing would be roads and streets. We'll be certainly advocating for governmental assistance from the state. The other is this, the LGA, or the city aid that we get through the state. Those are things that we lobby for with them. I know that Councilmember Roloff has lobbied for roads and streets with the Coalition for the 169, not the Coalition of Greater Minnesota Cities. But anything we can do, we put our best foot forward and let them know we're out here, and that we want the best services we can give to our citizens to make this an even more financially stable community. So thank you.
If I could get everybody to put that into their notes, that we'd like to get input either to myself or to Councilmember Krogman, let's say no later than the 15th of January, so he's got time to go ahead and put everything together so he can properly represent Sueur on the 30th of January at the CGMC meeting. Fair enough? 15th of January, to either myself or to Councilmember Krogman.
That's all I have, sir.
Thank you. Councilmember Sullivan.
I'd just like to piggyback on what these other gentlemen have said and thank everybody who participated in the Christmas or holiday celebration here in town, the light celebration, Chamber of Commerce and the area businesses. And then secondly, I'd like to thank Dave Johnson for his service to the city council. We'll be fairly missed here.
Okay. Thank you, Councilmember Sullivan. Councilmember Fallon, please bring us up to date on your world. I know you got a busy schedule this week with things coming up, so.
I have things coming up, but I don't have anything from prior. We have a MERPUC meeting, supposed to be on the 20th, and I'll let you know how that one goes. Yeah, I have my thoughts on that one. I'll keep those to myself. I want to thank everybody again for coming out for the celebration. I know that my family had a great time. It was nice to represent the city on a float. Thank you for city staff coming out and being our chauffeur. That was kind of fun. You know, and unfortunately Jasper couldn't be there. He wasn't feeling very well. But you missed a good time. It's nice to see so many people in town with a positive vibe about the town and getting involved. It's good to see. I look forward to what's going to happen at our community center and start seeing our community center represented as part of our community and not as a resort. I look forward to seeing programming going on at the community center for all of the people in the community, not just for people that are able to pay, but to have things for the community, seniors and youth and in between. I would like in our future maybe to see some type of a celebration for New Year's Eve at the community center. We've got a big block of ice there that would be kind of neat to have our own version of maybe dropping the corn cob instead of watching the apple fall down. Something that is community represented. You know, we have this piece of real estate and we call it a community center, and I'd really like to see more happening there to involve the community. So that's what I got.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Johnson, for your last time.
Yeah, well, I would just like to extend my appreciation for the opportunity of being on the council for 4 years and working with all of you and many others over that time. And I've had a chance to reflect on the last 4 years in a number of different ways as you start thinking about retiring from the council. And I think you'd be amazed at how much change has occurred in the last 4 years. And not because I'm on it, but that's the opportunity. I've been involved in a lot of change. 4 years ago, in January 2015, when I started, if you look around the table here, there was only one other person that was here with me, and that was Ben. Everything else, all the other council slots and the mayor and the city administrator had changed, as well as, and Mark came on board about 3 months after that, when John Schultz resigned. But just this table is almost completely turned over in 4 years. And then you look at the community development director, that position has changed, the building official has changed, public works position, public services position was added. We've got a community center now is changing, finance director has changed. We have a comp plan that was accomplished, a downtown master plan, a charter commission review, an affiliation with the new Bridgeview Medical Center, and all kinds of policies and things, but a lot of turnover, all with the idea of making improvements and change in our community. So the table is really, over the last 4 years, and for those who've been here for 2 years, has been really set during this time in the anticipation of concrete accomplishments in the future. We've had some accomplishments, I think reorganized and so forth, but I think they've all been pointing towards the future, that the comp plan, the downtown master plan, the parks and trails, and all of those things that we set the table for that. And that, to me, that's an immense amount of change in that time. My main reason for coming on the council was to get involved in the long-range planning. I was recruited for that purpose because of experience of that in the schools, and I'm glad to see that we've begun and come quite a ways in that planning process. I'm going to miss the stimulation of those changes. I'll be anticipating and watching what gets accomplished. As far as the CPAT and the comp plan, I would recommend, if that is going to continue to be taken seriously, that the city administrator, the mayor, co-lead that. I think freeing up the community development director for the planning commission and the EDA, that's a humongous task in itself. But it would send a tremendous message to the community if the two head guys on the city council of the city administrator and the mayor co-lead that CPAT. It doesn't need to meet every month, but its chief function is to coordinate all of that comp plan change, to make sure we have a future of the city forum, which has been discussed for next March, and for all that to continue. I guess that's my last recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. How about our city clerk, HR director, communications expert? Anything to report?
Not tonight, thanks.
Okay. How about our city attorney? Anything back there, Mr. Coryell?
Nothing to report.
Okay, I'll turn it over now to our city administrator.
Yeah, I just want to thank everybody who kind of picked up the slack for me when I was gone for the parade, both city council wise and city staff wise. Yeah, I think it worked out well. People stepped up and got the parade float going, and I think everything went well. One thing I want to just make sure we keep on the forefront is in 2019 we're going to have a lot of board and commission openings. So we've received some applications, but we have a lot of openings. So I just made a list, and we have 11 vacancies potentially on our boards and commissions. We have 3 on the airport commission, 1 on charter, 2 on the EDA, 4 on the planning commission, and then 1 on RPAC. So if anybody's interested in joining those boards and commissions, definitely fill out an application. What we'll do is we've just been kind of accumulating those applications, and then at the beginning of the year, during our organizational meeting that we have on January 2nd, we'll evaluate and potentially appoint during that time. So there are a lot of vacancies, so and not all of them, the people that are leaving are coming back. So definitely, if you know somebody who might want to get involved, you could definitely get involved and let them know. And if they have a problem with the process or need help with the process, have them reach out to me, because it's one of the most important things we need done here. And that's it.
Okay. And I think everybody's done such a wonderful job expressing their thanks to the community regarding the parade and the Christmas tree lighting ceremony. Thank you again, everybody that had anything to do with it. And mostly, again, I would like to thank Councilmember Dave Johnson for everything he's done for the city of Sueur over these last 4 years. If I get a round of applause from my fellow council members. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you, Lord. Thank you. We're going to continue to stay in touch. Okay. We're going to go ahead and entertain a motion for a 5-minute recess, at which time we'll go ahead and clear the city chambers, and we'll go ahead and have the rest of our
everybody knows.
Here comes Johnny. Want to shut the door, Johnny, please?
Get this other door.
That's shut. Can I get a motion to go ahead and, come back from our 5-minute recess, please?
So moved.
Second? Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion's carried. The city council is hereby closing the meeting pursuant to the open meeting law to conduct a performance evaluation of the city administrator. And